Chapter 718. Nangong's concealment was naturally done seamlessly, and Watergate's suspicions would not dissipate because of Nangong's perfect concealment. Standing from different perspectives, the problems they think about are naturally different. Naruto and Sasuke, as ninja who obeyed Woodleaf Village and ninja who worked for Bloodcloak Pavilion, can cooperate in the face of a common enemy at this moment. However, Nangong and Watergate are respectively the head of Bloodcloak Pavilion and the fourth Hokage of Woodleaf Village. But since they have reached such a position, whether it is Watergate or Nangong, they will not shirk the responsibility brought by their identity. Although Nangong and Watergate have their own considerations, it has to be said that the two of them have a common enemy in Otsutsuki Kagaya, so Nangong and Watergate can only temporarily postpone some of their plans under great pressure. Everything must be put after defeating Otsutsuki Kagaya. Nangong and Watergate have reached a tacit consensus in their hearts at this moment. After all, in the face of such a peerless powerhouse like Otsutsuki Kagaya, Watergate and Nangong must not have the slightest slack or distraction. Otherwise, the ninja world will be destroyed by Otsutsuki Kagaya. What can Nangong and Watergate's plans count as? Nangong head, I have also considered what you said. After all, space is really a mysterious and difficult thing to understand. Even if I have studied it for many years, I dare not say that I really know much about space. What I can touch is only a little bit of the real power of space. Minato didn't lie, because time and space were too mysterious and difficult to detect existences. We can still touch elements of nature like metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, and thunder with our own hands and use our own eyes to perceive them. But how can we perceive things like time and space, which are close to concepts, in what way? Even if we know that we are affected by time and space all the time and space are still an existence that we can't touch, and we can't even describe with words. Although I've only scratched the surface, I've found a lot of techniques that aren't that powerful but are very useful in the application of space. Actually, it's not as difficult to let Nangong head sword chi directly attack the space barrier as we thought. Just now, the barrier did indeed absorb my mental strength, but I can clearly feel that after my mental strength entered the barrier, it wasn't immediately devoured. Instead, it seemed to be stored. Because of this, I have now roughly figured out the spatial location of the space barrier. With this data, I can directly inscribe a rune on your weapon that can attack the space barrier. As long as the runes still exist, then Nangong, your attacks will be able to directly affect the space barrier. With your powerful inner strength and sword chi, you will definitely be able to find a path to victory for us. Although Watergate's description wasn't very detailed, the more Nangong listened, the more he felt that Watergate's understanding of space was definitely not as simple as superficial. As long as he could figure out the spatial coordinates, he could directly ignore the distance between spaces and directly transfer the attack to the space barrier between spaces. But he only relied on inscribing runes? If this kind of ability is considered superficial, then what are the other ninjutsu that are labeled as powerful? Nangong naturally cherished his god's disaster sword very much. Watergate's so-called inscribing of Nangong wasn't sure if it would directly damage the sword. Nangong had always believed that the god's disaster sword had its own sword soul. If he wanted his sword to be truly sharp, the first thing he had to do was to respect his sword, and then respect his own dignity as a swordsman. Therefore, Nangong directly opened his hand. Sword chi and internal strength continuously condensed in his palm. A small sword about 3 inches long and 2 fingers wide formed by interweaving sword chi and internal strength directly floated in Nangong's hand. Void sword condensation. This was an ability that Nangong had never displayed before. However, after seeing Nangong's floating small sword appear in his hand, Watergate had already thought of many possible applications of this ability in his mind. Woodleaf's original evaluation of Nangong was that Nangong's own long-range attacks weren't as threatening as his close-range attacks. However, this small sword floating in Nangong's hand could clearly be controlled by Nangong from a distance. Since Nangongzhi could control one sword without any burden, then what would happen if Nangongzhi could control 2, 3, 10, or even 100 swords? The subtle competition between Watergate and Nangongzhi was constantly revealing the trump cards that they had deliberately left behind. However, no matter if it was Nangongzhi or Watergate, they didn't have a trace of regret in their hearts. After all, a war might really break out between the two of them in the future. Since that was the case, they had to leave a shadow in each other's heart and let each other know how difficult it was to deal with them. Only a fool would pretend to be a pig to eat a tiger, because the consequences of pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger might really be that of a pig. Therefore, Watergate and Nangongzhi's choice was to win the psychological war even if they had to reveal their trump cards. This was the best strategy in war. Of course I can do that. Although Watergate was shocked, he was still able to perfectly control his expression. At this moment, whether it was Watergate's eyes or his expression, he had a gentle attitude, even though Watergate's heart had become extremely cold. Nangongzhi looked at Watergate. Although he couldn't see anything from his face and eyes, Nangongzhi was very clear that Watergate's heart couldn't be so calm at this moment. He stretched out his hand and handed the small sword that was condensed from his internal strength and sword chi to Watergate. Watergate directly stretched out his finger and gently placed it on the blade of the small sword. His finger seemed to tremble slightly, and the sharp sword chi on the small sword directly cut a thin wound on Watergate's finger. The wound wasn't very big, but blood constantly flowed out from it. Watergate didn't care about the deep wound on his hand. Instead, he directly injected his chakra into his blood. Then, on the small sword in Nangongzhi's hand, he wrote a rune that was similar to the flying thunder god's kunai, but more complicated. Chapter 7:19. Although the runes were cumbersome, Watergate himself had deep attainments in spatial runes and sealing techniques, so Watergate engraved them very quickly. The blood-containing chakra was directly engraved by Watergate on the small sword in Nangongzhi's hand, and the piercing chill emitted from the small sword made Watergate more serious. His fingertips danced, and finally, Watergate made the last stroke. When the last rune was completed by Watergate, all the runes engraved by Watergate's blood began to surge. The runes influenced and cooperated with each other, and the mysterious and unpredictable spatial aura was directly transmitted from this small sword. After several changes in their combination, all of the runes suddenly emitted a dazzling red light, and then directly melted into the small sword. A trace of blood-colored silk directly appeared in the small sword. The original azure small sword and the scarlet silk that filled the inside of the small sword at this moment formed a strange and unique beauty. Chief Nangong, I have already transmitted the spatial coordinates into this sword. However, the spatial coordinates may not be that accurate, so I hope that you can expand your attack range as much as possible. At the same time, you have to ensure the strength of your attack. After all, Watergate only relied on his own psychic power that had not dissipated to determine the specific location of the spatial barrier, but what kind of state the spatial barrier was, whether it was Watergate or Nangongzhi, they actually didn't know. So what Nangongzhi and Watergate could do was to expand the attack range as much as possible to ensure that they could really hit the spatial barrier. I understand. Hearing Watergate's words, Nangongzhi also quickly understood the meaning of Watergate. Although he and Watergate had more or less some disputes, the priority now was to defeat Otsutsuki Kagaya, otherwise, everything would be impossible. Nangongzhi slightly lifted the small sword in his hand, and the other hand made a sword finger, and the fingertips were facing the small sword in his hand. A trace of small sword energy directly gushed out from Nangongzhi's fingertips. In order not to destroy the runes engraved by Watergate on the small sword, Nangongzhi did not let the sword energy directly supplement the small sword, but directly let the sword energy surround the small sword. The small sword energy was too thin, so it looked a bit bright white. Just like 100 birds paying homage to a phoenix, the small sword that was condensed from sword chi and inner strength seemed to be filled with a kind of attraction to the small sword chi. The sword chi lingered on the small sword, adding a beautiful bright white ribbon to the small sword. Nangongzhi nodded to Watergate, as if to tell Watergate that he was ready. For Nangongzhi's means, Watergate didn't understand it very well, but the dangerous aura from the small sword and the white ribbon was real. Watergate could clearly feel how dangerous the small sword and the bright white ribbon were. If it really had a strong power as strong as his perception, it was not impossible to drill a hole in the spatial barrier. Go! Nangongzhi gently lifted the small sword in his hand and wrapped his inner strength around the small sword. He pointed his sword forward and the small sword was propelled forward by his inner strength. Even in the supergravity space, the increased gravity did not affect the flying speed of the small sword at all. The small sword flew faster and faster in the air, and the rune that Watergate carved with his own blood in the small sword seemed to be affected by the speed. The red light became more and more dazzling. When the red light reached its peak, it directly covered the entire small sword. With a flash of light, the small sword completely disappeared from the space. Although he couldn't see where the small sword flew to, Nangongzhi could still rely on the connection between him and the small sword to sense that the small sword was being guided by the blood mark in his body to a place quickly. After the small sword was no longer bound by the supergravity space, it seemed to have become faster. In just a moment, Nangongzhi could clearly sense that the small sword was infinitely close to the target. As the small sword flew slower and slower, Nangongzhi finally reached the peak of this feeling, and the feeling in his heart became stronger and stronger. Nangongzhi directly formed a hand seal that was different from the ninjutsu hand seals in front of his chest, and softly shouted, "Explode." Although he didn't know how far away the small sword was, the moment Nangongzhi issued his command, the sword energy and internal force inside the small sword began to attack each other. The internal force was neutral and peaceful, while the sword energy was sharp and overbearing. These two things were very different in nature. When Nangongzhi was in his body, Nangongzhi could rely on his own spiritual force to maintain the balance between the two, and even make them promote each other. But once Nangongzhi completely withdrew his spiritual force and deliberately broke the balance between the two, the sword energy and internal force began to attack each other. A large amount of energy collided with each other, and the power caused by such a collision was difficult to estimate. Finally, the bright white ribbon condensed by Nangongzhi's small sword energy dispersed again at this moment, turning back into small sword energy. These sword energy continued to divide into shorter and denser sword energy. The ribbons that were originally wrapped around the small swords had now become short but upright filaments that directly wrapped around the small swords that were slightly deformed due to the constant collisions within them. Finally, the internal force and sword energy in the small sword seemed to have reached the limit of the conflict between them, and Nangongzhi's spiritual force left in the small sword could no longer restrain such an impact. Like a balloon exploding, the balloon with the small sword as the inside and the sword energy as the outer layer directly exploded. The dense and small sword energy was directly pushed away by the force of the explosion, and the explosion of the small sword itself became even more terrifying because of the outer layer condensed by the sword energy. The blood-red runes engraved by Watergate on the small sword had completely turned into blood-red energy, and directly dispersed in the explosion of energy, giving the energy the ability to supply the existence of the realm. Chapter 720. It wasn't only Nangongzhi who was paying attention to the changes inside the space, but Watergate was also paying attention to the place where his psychic force was left behind. Nangongzhi controlled his sword to attack the place where his psychic force was left behind, and Watergate was naturally able to observe the changes in the space barrier through this psychic force. Watergate could clearly feel that the space barrier was getting thinner and thinner, and the powerful impact was constantly weakening the space barrier. Even Watergate's psychic force that was restrained by the space barrier seemed to have some room to move. Now is the time. Just when Nangongzhi was constantly urging his sword to burst out more power, Watergate suddenly put his hand on Nangongzhi's shoulder, and a large amount of chakra surged in his body, directly wrapping himself and Nangongzhi in a chakra barrier. Nangongzhi and Watergate's figure flashed, and directly appeared in the dark space gap where Nangongzhi was temporarily sucked into the defense of heaven. A somewhat transparent crimson crystal barrier directly appeared in the sight of Nangongzhe and Watergate. At this moment it was obvious that a part of the crimson crystal barrier had very deep cracks, and compared to the other parts of the barrier, it was obvious that a part of the barrier was caved in. Watergate and Nangongzhe were now in front of this hole. "Is this the space barrier you mentioned, fourth Hokage?" Nangongzhe looked at the crimson crystal barrier and asked Watergate, who was standing beside him. Watergate's eyes were also filled with a faint blurriness at this moment. As a ninja proficient in space ninjutsu, the space gap and the space barrier in front of him at this moment were too attractive for Watergate. If he had enough time, he would definitely be able to study a lot of precious knowledge that he had never touched before. But unfortunately, Watergate didn't have enough time. With a little disappointment in his eyes, Watergate said to Nangongzhe, "Yes, this is the space barrier we need to break. When we were in the gravity space before, this space barrier was very intact, so I couldn't directly move the two of us directly into such a space gap. But thanks to your attack, Nangongzhe, a gap appeared in such a space barrier, so I can directly come into this space gap to observe the situation of the space barrier at close range, and then make the corresponding strategy." After getting Watergate's confirmation, Nangongzhe looked at the broken space barrier and said to Watergate, "What do you want me to do now, attack again to break this space barrier?" Watergate heard Nangongzhe's question, shook his head, and said to Nangongzhe, "Nangongzhe, please don't be impatient. With the strength of you and me, although it is quite difficult to break such a space barrier, it is naturally possible to do it together. But what we are facing now is not a space barrier that is natural. This space barrier is built by our enemy, Kagaya Otsutsuki. Once we really break the space barrier so simply and violently, then Kagaya Otsutsuki is likely to be able to sense what is happening here and make preparations in advance. At that time, we will inevitably fall into a passive position, but if we think about it in reverse, we may be able to directly penetrate such a space barrier in a more secretive way and then enter the core of this space, then we will be the ones with the advantage." Hearing Watergate's words, Nangongzhe also understood Watergate's plan. After all, Kagaya Otsutsuki is more powerful than the four of them combined. If you want to win against the strong, the most important principles to abide by are to be bold, careful, and hide your true intentions and even your own existence as much as possible under any circumstances. In that case, I have a general idea. Since he agreed with Watergate's plan, Nangongzhe naturally began to think about how to break through such a space barrier. Nangongzhe's eyes swept through some cracks that still have sword chi and internal force raging. Suddenly, his eyes moved, and he said to Watergate, "Through what happened just now, we have been able to find that such a space barrier has a very high resistance to chakra and mental power, but it doesn't have much defensive ability against the sword chi and internal force that I can mobilize. We can directly wrap ourselves in internal force like now, and use the sword chi as a drill to directly attack the weak part of the space barrier. In this way, we have a high possibility of directly penetrating such a space barrier." What Nangongzhe can see, Watergate can naturally see. Therefore, Nangongzhe is very clear in his heart that Watergate wants him to stand up and take on the task of breaking through the space barrier. Breaking through the space barrier will naturally greatly weaken Nangongzhe's internal force and sword chi. This is also Watergate's insurance for himself, an insurance that Nangongzhe can't refuse. This was a blatant conspiracy. We need to break through the space barrier, and the only person who can break through the space barrier is you. After breaking through the space barrier, you will have to consume a lot of energy. Your consumption is a very good thing for me. For the future of the shinobi world and your own ambitions, you have to become a knife in my hand and be my vanguard. Watergate's move can be said to have completely pushed himself to the position of initiative, and in order to not have the slightest chance of being criticized, Nangongzhe directly opened his mouth and directly took on such an action that won't have much benefit and will even bring some harm to himself. Just like what he said before, Nangongzhe had no reason to refuse. After hearing Nangongzhe's words, Watergate looked at Nangongzhe apologetically, and then said to Nangongzhe, "In that case, I'll have to trouble you, Nangongzhe. Nangongzhe took a deep look at Watergate, then directly turned his body and released a large amount of internal force and sword chi. The internal force condensed into a ball that wrapped himself and Watergate in it, and the sword chi directly turned into a huge drill that directly attached to the front of the ball. Chapter 721. Although Watergate did put some effort into this matter, there is no way for him to avoid it. After all, Nangongzhe still has his own responsibilities and obligations behind him, pushing him to fight against a powerful existence like Kagaya. Nangongzhe's body constantly rushed out of his body, and the Kenki constantly converged on the tip of the drill that Nangongzhe just created. With the continuous integration of the Kenki, the drill also became harder and sharper. Fourth Hokage, get ready, I'm going to go directly. After Nangongzhe reminded Watergate, he didn't wait for Watergate's response and directly urged the internal energy in his body. The sphere that was formed by internal energy, including Nangongzhe and Watergate, also began to rush in the direction of the crimson crystal wall under Nangongzhe's control. Although Nangongzhe didn't give Watergate enough time to adjust his body after reminding him, but after all, Watergate is also a powerful existence who stands at the peak of the ninja world, and even has one foot in the peak of the ninja world. Such a simple operation like stabilizing his body is completely possible for him. After attaching chakra to the soles of his feet, Watergate adjusted his body a little, and directly stood in the sphere of internal energy like Nangongzhe. No matter how the sphere accelerated and rotated, Watergate still remained motionless. Soon, Nangongzhe used his internal energy and Kenki to create a drill directly connected with the crimson crystal wall. Under Nangongzhe's control, the sharp drill condensed by Kenki directly pierced into Nangongzhe's largest and deepest crack. After the drill completely penetrated into the crack, the Kenki that originally looked like a drill also began to rotate under Nangongzhe's control. In the process of rotating, the Kenki began to rush out of the drill's shackles and began to cut the crimson crystal wall around it. At first, it was a difficult task for the small Kenki to cooperate with the drill to cut the crystal wall. But soon, Nangongzhe seemed to have found a way. The angle of the Kenki cutting the crystal wall was no longer straight, but with a slight curve. The crystal wall itself was transparent, but Nangongzhe seemed to have discovered the texture contained in the transparent crystal wall, and with a very small amount of Kenki, he could directly cut the hard crystal wall. However, this huge crimson crystal wall was located in a space crack after all. In the past, when Nangongzhe was looking for the Lion Clan's alternate space, he had drifted through a space crack. Even now, Nangongzhe's heart was filled with lingering fear when he recalled the danger at that time. The current Nangongzhe was naturally much stronger than before, but in the face of an existence like the realm that was beyond the understanding and touch of ordinary humans, Nangongzhe's heart was filled with an indescribable awe. Humans were often the most courageous when they were at their most ignorant. This was because ignorance would make people unable to perceive the dangers hidden in the things they faced. Since they couldn't see the dangers, they naturally wouldn't become afraid. But when a person's cognition became richer and richer, and they were able to observe the things they faced from all angles, the irresistible fear or awe would directly devour the courage hidden in their hearts. Nangongzhe was naturally the same. After so many years of ups and downs in the shinobi world, Nangongzhe was down and out, Nangongzhe was glorious, and now, Nangongzhe was in control of a force that couldn't be ignored in the shinobi world, the Bloodcloak Pavilion, and became an existence that even the 5 great shinobi villages of the shinobi world had to face. At this moment, Nangongzhe was once again facing the space crack that he once wandered through. The awe in his heart was even more intense. This was also why Nangongzhe was so careful to control his Kenki and internal force so that he could complete what he needed to do with the least consumption. The space crack wasn't a playground for children. As long as there was a negligence, it was likely to lead to extremely serious consequences. Nangongzhe and Watergate weren't afraid of death, but their own death would cause chaos to an organization, a force, a country, and even the shinobi world. Such consequences naturally made Watergate and Nangongzhe have to be very careful and cautious. The crimson crystal wall was penetrated little by little. Finally, with a crisp sound, Nangongzhi drilled a small gap in the crimson crystal wall. On the opposite side of the gap was a black space crack that was also shrouded in darkness, but Watergate's face showed a little joy. This must be the core of the so-called spacetime ninjutsu, Heaven's Defense, that Otsutsuki Kagaya mentioned. Although this space crack is similar to the previous one, it contains a larger space force. As long as this space force is used, it can easily complete the jump between spaces. And here, I can clearly sense the mark of Flying Thunder God that I deliberately left on Naruto and Sasuke. Gently closing his eyes, Watergate directly unfolded his spiritual force and carefully observed the space crack around him. Using his spiritual force to capture a part of the space energy, Watergate's hands began to quickly form hand seals. Usually, when Watergate used the Flying Thunder God Jutsu, if it was a short distance, he didn't need to form hand seals at all. If it was some advanced ninjutsu that was extended from the Flying Thunder God Jutsu, he would need to form hand seals 2 or 3 times to guide the chakra. But this time, Watergate's hands were constantly forming hand seals. According to Nangongzhi's statistics, Watergate formed at least 20 hand seals in this very short time, and most of them were not conventional hand seals used to perform ninjutsu. Nangongzhi wasn't a ninja who practiced chakra and performed ninjutsu in the conventional sense. Although Nangongzhi was very clear about the common sense of ninja, he wasn't a ninja after all, so he didn't have the ability to judge the nature of a ninjutsu from the combination of ninja hand seals and non-conventional hand seals. But the more hand seals, the longer the preparation time, the more powerful a ninjutsu can be. Now that Watergate had prepared a ninjutsu for such a long time, naturally, it wouldn't be a bad product. Chapter 722. Reverse Flying Thunder God Jutsu. Finally, after preparing for a long time, Watergate ended his fingers flying up and down, and the name of the ninjutsu that he had been brewing for a long time was also said by Watergate. It's just one more word than the Flying Thunder God Jutsu that Watergate has always used, but the extra word has extraordinary significance. The principle of the Flying Thunder God Jutsu is that the caster directly transfers his body to the location set by himself through the relevant theory of space jump. Later, after a series of improvements, Watergate developed the Flying Thunder God Guide, which is a way to set up a barrier on the Flying Thunder God Kunai and then wrap the energy in it to transfer it. But the Flying Thunder God Guide can only transfer energy, and the location of the transfer can't be too far away, otherwise, the transfer is likely to fail. In other words, in fact, the Flying Thunder God Guide is an incomplete version of the Reverse Flying Thunder God Jutsu that Watergate is using now. Being able to transfer objects with the Flying Thunder God mark for his own use is an important stage goal that Watergate has set for his own research on the Flying Thunder God Jutsu. Now Watergate is in the space gap, although it is very dangerous, it is also the position closest to the origin of space. A large amount of space energy is restrained by Watergate, and Watergate also began to try to display the Reverse Flying Thunder God Jutsu that he has been studying for a long time. The reason why Watergate constantly seals at a very fast speed is in fact that Watergate is constantly modifying the values and parameters of his ninjutsu through the seals to adjust his ninjutsu. After thinking that his various parameters and values are completely ready, Watergate said the name of his ninjutsu and injected a large amount of his chakra into his hands to activate the ninjutsu. The brilliant blue and white light instantly covered both of Watergate's hands. Watergate suddenly put his hands together, and then slowly opened his palms wrapped in the blue and white light. Although Watergate's palms were slowly opened, the blue and white light that shrouded Watergate's hands gradually separated from Watergate's palms, and slowly condensed into a small and solid ball of light in the place where Watergate's 2 palms were opened. Watergate's forehead and cheeks were wet with sweat at the moment, and even his half-long golden hair was stuck to his cheeks at the moment. Watergate's chakra and physical strength are now consumed, but Watergate has no choice but to continue. From the situation of Watergate and Nangongzhi passing through the space barrier together, Kagaya is obviously on guard against this kind of behavior that wants to directly travel through space. Although he doesn't know how much strength Nangongja spent to pass through the space barrier just now, the fatigue in Nangongja's eyes at the moment has proved that even if Nangongja deliberately reduces his consumption, passing through the space barrier still brings a lot of pressure to Nangongja. Of course, Watergate can directly ignore Nangongja's consumption and use all kinds of means to force Nangongja to pass through the space barrier again and again. Even if Nangongja has no objection, this will only make Nangongja directly rely on himself, and his purpose of gathering all forces will be directly ruined. Before, Watergate did want to use some means to cause a certain consumption of Nangongja, but if he directly makes Nangongja lose the power to fight, then how can Kagaya deal with him? Moreover, passing through the space barrier again and again, as long as Otsutsuki Kagaya is not a fool, he will definitely notice that something is wrong. In this case, it is even more impossible to make such a stupid move, otherwise it will only drag everyone into a difficult situation. Therefore, Watergate can only give up his original plan, and then he began to use ninjutsu to bring Naruto and Sasuke to his side, so as to ensure that his side strength is relatively intact. The distance between Watergate's palms is getting bigger and bigger, and the bluish-white ball in Watergate's palm is also constantly expanding and began to slowly deform. The bluish-white ball began to extend and transform, and finally, in Watergate's hand, the ball of bluish-white energy directly turned into a kunai similar to the trident flying thunder god. Seeing such a kunai formed in his hand, Watergate's eyes finally showed a trace of relief. After all, as long as such a space kunai can be formed, then his reverse flying thunder god jutsu will be half successful. Watergate held the space kunai condensed with a lot of chakra in his hand, and then directly inserted the space kunai in his hand into the void in front of him. The space kunai was so strangely inserted in the air, as if it was really inserted into something. Watergate opened his palm and placed it on the handle of the space kunai, and a lot of chakra was directly instilled into the space kunai by Watergate. At this moment, Naruto and Sasuke, who were in the ice space and acid space, were suddenly covered by a layer of chakra. The source of this chakra is none other than the flying thunder god imprint that Watergate left on Naruto and Sasuke. Oyaji, Yondaime Hokage, Naruto and Sasuke also instantly sensed Watergate's aura from these chakra. Naruto naturally had infinite trust in Watergate, and Sasuke also believed that Watergate, who has always been very wise in such a situation, would never do such a thing. So whether it was Naruto or Sasuke, when their bodies were wrapped by Watergate's chakra, they didn't resist, and directly let Watergate's chakra control their bodies. Naruto, Sasuke, come back. Watergate whispered softly, and it didn't sound like a voice full of confidence when using ninjutsu. Instead, it sounded like a prayer in his tone. Now Watergate is actually gambling that his first reverse flying thunder god jutsu will succeed, gambling that Naruto and Sasuke can gather by his side, gambling that his dangerous move will make Black Zetsu and Otsutsuki Kagaya have no way to detect his plan, and then give them a chance to defeat Otsutsuki Kagaya. This was a huge gamble, a gamble that the Watergate was quietly implicated in his heart, a gamble that smashed everything on the balance. Chapter 723. The space kunai, which was inserted by Watergate in the void, suddenly burst into a blue-white light. In such a blue-white light, there was also a colorless but seemingly full of the purest space energy. This space energy was naturally the space energy that Watergate forcibly restrained from the space gap of Heaven's defense by relying on his psychic power. This space energy was also an important safeguard for Watergate to be able to perform reverse flying thunder god jutsu. The space energy was divided into two during the movement process. Under the control of Watergate, the two space energy reformed into spherical energy suspended in the air. These two spherical space energy were the space coordinates and insurance measures set by Watergate for Naruto and Sasuke's return. When performing a space jump, especially a reverse space jump, although the human body was only in the space gap for a very short time, every time the space jump was opened and the space jump was released, the human body would be under extreme pressure. Watergate and Nangongja had been in contact with space energy several times, and their chakra and internal force were also very strong, so they could stay in the space gap for a long time like this. However, Sasuke and Naruto were different. Although these two children became very powerful for various reasons, the strength of their abilities did not mean that their vision, insight, and adaptability were equally strong. The reverse flying thunder god jutsu that Watergate was now performing could only be regarded as an unfinished product. In order to ensure the safety of Naruto and Sasuke, Watergate naturally had to allocate more power to protect the safety of Naruto and Watergate. The small sphere formed by space energy began to emit small light spots at this moment and merged into the surrounding dark void. All the energy finally condensed to the highest level at this moment, and the space energy sphere was also completely integrated into the unknown void at this moment. Two lights flashed, and the figures of Naruto and Sasuke appeared directly at the original location of the space energy sphere. The blue-white space kunai that was originally inserted into the void by Watergate also dissipated at this moment. Watergate forcibly suppressed his physical fatigue and raised his head to look at Naruto and Sasuke, who he summoned using the reverse flying thunder god jutsu. Naruto's condition was good. Although there was still a little green corrosive liquid on his body and he looked a little tired, overall, he still maintained his combat power at a considerable level. At this moment, Sasuke closed his eyes tightly, as if he was comprehending something. Although it's not very clear what Sasuke comprehended from such a passive space jump, but according to the heavenly hand power that Sasuke used in the previous battle, and Sasuke's own top-notch talent, Watergate believes that Sasuke's comprehension will definitely bring Sasuke great progress. Oyaji. I'll help you restore chakra. The moment Naruto appeared, he saw his father's slightly tired look. Naruto directly walked to Watergate's side and used 6 paths power to purify the violent chakra in Jubi, and directly injected Jubi's pure chakra into Watergate's body to replenish Watergate's consumption. After hearing Naruto's words, Watergate also nodded and accepted the chakra transmission from Naruto. While Naruto was constantly purifying Jubi's chakra and transmitting it into Watergate's body, Sasuke, who still had some icicles on his body, also opened his eyes at this moment, and the 6 tomo in his left eye also rotated quickly. The breath on Sasuke's body was originally erratic, high and low, but after Sasuke opened his eyes and the lines in his eyes stopped rotating, all the breath was retracted back into Sasuke's body. Nangong, sensei. Sasuke slightly clasped his fist and bowed to Nangongja. Although his body was a little stiff because of the low temperature and the omnipresent danger in the ice space, Sasuke was still very respectful to Nangongja as a disciple. Looking at Sasuke's respectful salute, Nangongja also walked directly to Sasuke, stretched out his hand and brushed away some of the frost on Sasuke's body, then held Sasuke's arms and helped Sasuke up. Thank you for your hard work, Sasuke. Nangongja put his hand on Sasuke's shoulder and said to Sasuke in a slightly heavy tone, originally, things like saving the crisis should be a matter for me and Watergate. But this time, we are indeed not capable enough, and you and Naruto also coincidentally obtained Rikudo Yang and Rikudo In power from Rikudo Sun Nin, which became the key to sealing Otsutsuki Kagaya. Although you seem to have just escaped from a dangerous place, I still need to tell you that you are not slacking off yet. Our ultimate goal is to defeat Otsutsuki Kagaya. Nangongja and Watergate both hope that Naruto and Sasuke can grow, but Nangongja and Watergate's roles are different. Watergate is Naruto's father, so everything that Watergate does to Naruto is from his perspective as a father. That is to say, Watergate is the driving force behind Watergate's words to Naruto. Nangongja is Sasuke's sensei. Although the role of sensei is close to a father-like role to some extent, sensei is relatively more rational, so when he speaks, he seems to be more old-fashioned and stiff. Sasuke just wanted to say something, but when his mouth opened slightly, Nangongja directly unsheathed the sword in his hand and said to Sasuke, although you and Naruto are the main forces against Otsutsuki Kagaya, I won't let the two of you charge in front while I watch from the sidelines. As your sensei, I will do my best to pave the way for you. Otherwise, the sword in my hand will laugh at me." Hearing Nangong's words, Sasuke abruptly swallowed some of the words he just wanted to say to prove his determination. His sensei is still his sensei. Even though Nangong's character has more or less changed over the years, Nangong's unbending kendo will always be the backbone of Nangong's body. Chapter 724. After exchanging a few words with each other, Naruto, Sasuke, Watergate, and Nangongja also began to seize the time to restore the energy in their bodies and nourish their spirit. After all, the experience just now has more or less affected the state of the four of them. For the upcoming battle, they must seize every minute and second to maintain their best state. But whether it's Naruto, Sasuke, Watergate, or Nangongja, they know very well that it's impossible for them to get enough time to recover. Although the four of them were not directly attacked by Kaguya when they entered Heaven's defense, it doesn't mean that Kaguya really thinks that they can rest easy after entering Heaven's defense. Even if Kaguya thinks so, as someone who has been in the shinobi world for many years, he knows the truth that a lion needs to go all out to catch a rabbit. He will definitely pay more attention to the four of them again and again. And once Kaguya finds that the four of them are no longer in the space he arranged for the four of them, it's time for the final battle. In the core of the 6 dimensions of Heaven's defense, the origin sphere. Kaguya was suspended in the center of the space, his long silver-gray hair fell directly to a position lower than the soles of his feet. Although the wide robe on his body covered his body, it also brought endless holiness to Kaguya. A large number of pure chakra constantly appeared in the beginning sphere. This chakra that was absorbed by the sacred tree from the ninjas was all absorbed by Kaguya's body to supplement the missing energy in his body. When Kaguya felt that the energy in his body was infinitely close to saturation, he finally opened his eyes slowly. The milky white pupils were located in the center of his white eyeballs. They were a little strange eyes, but on Kaguya's face, they looked so harmonious. "Zetsu, during the time I was absorbing energy, did anything happen?" Although the sacred tree fruit affected Kaguya's mind to a certain extent, Kaguya, known as the goddess of Uno, was never a stupid existence. As soon as she woke up, Kaguya began to ask Black Zetsu, who was hiding in his sleeve, about everything that happened during her sleep. Black Zetsu himself is the life evolved from Kaguya's spiritual power, the so-called third sun. Therefore, for Otsutsuki Kaguya, Black Zetsu can be said to be completely dedicated. In the past thousands of years, Black Zetsu may have been a subordinate of different people, but his loyalty will always be left to his mother, Otsutsuki Kaguya. Reporting to Mother. Nangongja and Namikaze Watergate met in the supergravity space. Under the joint efforts of the two, they penetrated the space barrier, and Namikaze Watergate used the space energy in the space gap to cast a ninjutsu that seems to have the opposite effect of the Flying Thunder God Jutsu. He directly pulled Uzumaki Naruto and Uchiha Sasuke out of the acid space and the ice space. Now all four of them are staying in the space gap. It seems that they want to use this short time to restore their strength. After hearing Otsutsuki Kaguya's question, Black Zetsu directly told everything he knew to his mother Otsutsuki Kaguya. If Nangongja or Namikaze Watergate were present, after hearing Black Zetsu's words, they will immediately be stunned, because Black Zetsu's understanding of the situation is too detailed, and it is very likely that even the conversation between them has been heard by Black Zetsu. In fact, such a strange ability is attributed to Black Zetsu's psychic power. Psychic power is invisible, but it has a complete body because of the power of 6 paths and yin-yang release. Such a situation can almost be said to be a miracle. It is precisely because his essence is psychic power, so when Kaguya entered the origin space and began to absorb a lot of chakra, Black Zetsu also absorbed a part of the chakra. However, when absorbing this chakra, Black Zetsu did not directly store this chakra in his body. Instead, he returned this chakra back to the origin space. A large number of chakra, after being processed by Black Zetsu, spread across the 6 major spaces through the connection between the various spaces. In the beginning, the amount of chakra processed by Black Zetsu was still too little, so only a small area could be detected. However, in order to protect the organs in his body, Watergate absorbed a lot of natural energy in the space. This natural energy is naturally mixed with the pure energy that has been processed by Black Zetsu's chakra. This energy is Black Zetsu's eyes and ears. The energy lurking in Watergate's body can't directly cause any threat to Watergate, but it is enough to grasp Watergate's personal movements. This is the reason why Black Zetsu can get all the information about Nangong's group so easily. After hearing the information stated by Black Zetsu, Otsutsuki Kagaya didn't have the slightest worry in his eyes. He was still like a god, his eyes were full of indifference. Is that so? It seems that Hagoromo's 2 children are not bad, but it's not enough. Since they are children, they should act like a spoiled child. If they go too far, it's natural for me to teach them what is right and what is wrong. As for that Nangongja and Namikaze Minato, these 2 people are really too noisy. Is it because of these 2 people that my 2 grandsons have such a bad attitude towards me, their grandmother? Naruto and Sasuke themselves are the 2 children of Rikudo-san Nin, Otsutsuki Azura and Otsutsuki Indra's chakra reincarnation. For Kagaya, Naruto and Sasuke are his own grandchildren. Seeing his 2 grandchildren actually disobeying him like this, Kagaya's mind couldn't help but think of his 2 children, Hagoromo and Hamura, joining hands to deal with him and seal him. His originally calm eyes were full of a violent mood at this moment. Chapter 725. Otsutsuki Kagaya is a mother, and a mother with a twisted and extremely possessive personality. When Otsutsuki Kagaya swallowed the chakra fruit, she didn't know whether it was because of the chakra fruit or because of the sudden surge in her strength. Otsutsuki Kagaya's character was greatly distorted. For such a twisted and possessive mother, the biggest pain in her heart was that her 2 children betrayed her and sealed themselves away. However, Otsutsuki Kagaya didn't have any hatred for her 2 children. On the contrary, Otsutsuki Kagaya's heart was still full of deep love for her 2 children, but this love was very twisted. She wanted to tame her 2 children and even take them as her own. Now her 2 children obviously no longer exist in this world, but the faint breath from Sasuke and Naruto still made Otsutsuki Kagaya involuntarily regard them as her own children. And perhaps it's because Naruto and Sasuke are not Hagoromo and Hamura, so Otsutsuki Kagaya's hope in her heart is even greater. As long as she can get proof from 2 people like Naruto and Sasuke that she is not an unqualified mother, Otsutsuki Kagaya can also untie a knot in her heart. Sasuke, Naruto, Watergate, and Nangongja are all trying their best to restore their energy in the space gap, and try to rest their spirits as much as possible. But all of a sudden, all 4 of them opened their eyes. The reason why Watergate and Nangongja opened their eyes was that there was a malice that couldn't be ignored at all, which made Nangongja and Watergate shudder. As for Naruto and Sasuke, they also felt a pair of eyes watching them. Although there was a weak malice, most of it was a strong desire that was difficult to suppress, a strong desire to completely occupy something. It's coming. Although the 4 of them felt different gazes, all of them had an instinctive vigilance in their hearts. It was as if they had already sensed in advance that something beyond their control was about to happen, or even was happening right beside them. Sasuke, Naruto, Watergate, and Nangongja, the 4 of them, after all, are the strongest in the world, so after such a kind of vigilance appeared in their hearts, they immediately prepared to disperse to face different dangers in different situations. However, the reactions of Sasuke, Naruto, Watergate, and Nangongja were still a little bit inferior. Suddenly, a huge black hole appeared in the void under the 4 people's feet, like a piece of paper being peeled off, and a strong suction force appeared from the hole, which directly pulled all 4 peoples. Jutsu, Naruto's jutsu, shuttling between the 6 worlds. Otsutsuki Kagaya just waved his hand in the beginning space. Naruto's jutsu directly formed 4 space caves under the feet of Nangongja and the other 3 people, and directly absorbed all 4 of them. After passing through the space tunnel formed by Naruto's jutsu, Nangongja and the other three were all transmitted to the beginning space, where Otsutsuki Kagaya was. The barrier formed by the internal force and space energy, which were originally used to keep them safe in the space crack, now became the best defensive measure to offset the impact of the four people. The four figures fell directly from the sky and smashed on the ground, splashing a lot of dust. Otsutsuki Kagaya's eyes looked at the smoke and dust in the sky with a little bit of disgust. Otsutsuki Kagaya gently waved the slightly wide sleeves on his clothes, and a strong wind rushed out directly from the sleeves. After the strong wind rushed out of the sleeves came into contact with the air, the wind became stronger and stronger, and the dust in the sky was directly wiped clean like graffiti on a blackboard. Without the smoke to block his sight, Otsutsuki Kagaya also saw the four huge pits on the ground due to the fall from a high altitude. But at this moment, whether it was Naruto, Sasuke, Watergate, or Nangongja, all four figures disappeared. Ha! What's the point of a mere ant playing such a small trick? Otsutsuki Kagaya didn't feel any anger after seeing Nangongja's group disappear. Instead, he seemed to be laughing at Nangongja's behavior of ants jumping up and down in front of him. Otsutsuki Kagaya closed his eyes slightly, and his hands made a cross-shaped seal, and a large amount of chakra gathered. Byakugan, open. That's right, Otsutsuki Kagaya's milky white eyes aren't any other dojutsu, but it's one of the three dojutsu that has a relatively low presence compared to the Rinnegan and Sharingan in the shinobi world, but it's one of the three dojutsu that has a large number of people, Byakugan. The Hyuga clan is not the descendant of Hagoromo Otsutsuki, but the descendant of Hagoromo Otsutsuki, the younger brother of Hagoromo Otsutsuki. Hagoromo Otsutsuki inherited the sage's body and the Rinnegan on Otsutsuki Kagaya's forehead, and Otsutsuki Hamura inherited the Byakugan in Otsutsuki Kagaya's eyes. Although the Hyuga clan's Byakugan seems to be far more useful for reconnaissance than combat, at this moment, the Byakugan in Otsutsuki Kagaya's eyes completely surpasses the existence of Byakugan in the ordinary sense. At the same time, Otsutsuki Kagaya's Byakugan also has an extremely powerful offensive power. Through perfect Byakugan detection, Otsutsuki Kagaya has found Sasuke and Naruto behind him, and on his left and right sides, Watergate and Nangongja each occupied one side, ready to fight with him. With a slight smile on his face, Otsutsuki Kagaya stood on the ground from a suspended state and whispered softly, "It's really a simple trick. Pincer attack left and right to create opportunities for the rear." Naruto and Sasuke's Hagoromo's six-path Yang and six-path Yin power are indeed dangerous for me, but you two ordinary mortals, do you really think you have the ability to entangle me and create opportunities for Azura and Indra? Chapter 726. Kagaya's voice was getting louder and louder. Originally, it was just a whisper, but now it resounded throughout the origin sphere. Watergate and Nangongja naturally wouldn't do nothing. After seeing that Kagaya had activated Byakugan, Watergate and Nangongja had already rushed out of their hiding positions at the same time. Byakugan itself is the insight eye, clairvoyance eye. Any concealment ability will be useless in front of Byakugan. Moreover, Kagaya's eyes can be said to be the most primitive and most powerful Byakugan. How can he not see through their concealment? Watergate and Nangongja themselves are ninjas with rich combat experience. When they saw that they could no longer hide, Nangongja and Watergate directly launched an attack on Kagaya. Although they lost the advantage of hiding and launching a surprise attack, it is precisely because they have lost their way of retreat that both Watergate and Nangongja have an indomitable momentum. Like two sharp knives, Nangongja and Watergate rushed straight towards Kagaya's position. In order to ensure their sprint speed, Watergate only condensed 2 Rasengan in his hands, and Nangongja only filled his sword with sword energy. Nangongja and Watergate intend to fight hand-to-hand with Kagaya. It's a hand-to-hand battle where they exchange injuries and even fight to the death. Perhaps the power of ninjutsu is indeed very great, and the effect is also very brilliant, but the real thing that can really entangle the enemy is the close-range taijutsu. Watergate himself is a ninja who is very good at close combat. Even the Rasengan developed by Watergate himself is not a long-range attack. As for Nangongzhe, as the head of the Blood Garment Pavilion, which was a sect that cultivated internal energy, he was naturally proficient in close combat. His swordsmanship was exquisite and peerless, and he even had a powerful attack like the sword Qi to increase his attack power. Looking at Nangongzhe and Watergate rushing towards him without fear of death, the power in Kagaya's body also surged. He opened his hands, and two gray-brown bone spurs appeared directly in his hands. Kill Gray Bones. The gray-brown bone spurs appeared directly in Kagaya's palm, but Kagaya didn't directly force these bone spurs out completely, but let these bone spurs still grow in his palm, as if two bone swords emerged from his body. Kagaya didn't pay attention to Nangongzhe, who was rushing towards him with Heaven's Disaster Sword in his hand. Instead, he directly turned around and rushed directly towards Watergate's position with his unparalleled speed. In the face of a pincer attack, the most effective method was not to directly fight to the death with the obviously stronger side of the two, but to directly defeat the relatively weaker side of the two, so that the so-called pincer attack would no longer exist. Under Otsutsuki Kagaya's calculation, the gray-brown bone spur directly pierced the two Rasengan in Minato's hand. The Rasengan itself is actually a cluster of chakra that is barely stable. Once the internal balance is destroyed or the outside is hit to a certain extent, the Rasengan will directly explode. At this moment, the Rasengan in Minato's hand is mixed with a small amount of Senjutsu chakra, which is close to the Senjutsu, Futon, Rasengan, an inferior version of the Senjutsu, Rasengan. But even if it's an inferior version of the Senjutsu, Rasengan, it still has far more power than an ordinary Rasengan. Minato himself was prepared to use injury for injury or even death to entangle Otsutsuki Kagaya, so when he saw that Otsutsuki Kagaya directly attacked the Rasengan in his hand, Minato also directly accelerated his speed and rushed in the direction of Otsutsuki Kagaya. Both of them were extremely fast, almost in an instant, they had already arrived in front of each other. According to Minato's judgment, at this moment, Otsutsuki Kagaya should continue to directly attack the Rasengan with the two gray-brown bone spurs in his hand. After all, in such a close contact, there is no possibility for Kagaya to change his move. At that time, it turned out that Watergate's own expectations were still a little off. Kagaya really changed his move in such a situation. The sharp bone spurs that were originally aimed at the two Rasengan were now aimed directly at Watergate's chest. Even if the two Rasengan were about to attack his chest, Kagaya still didn't seem to retreat. In such a battle, Otsutsuki Kagaya was in an advantageous position. There was no need to take the risk of fighting Minato in such a desperate way, unless Otsutsuki Kagaya himself had something to rely on. Whether it is for Uchiha Obito or Uchiha Madara, after these two people absorbed the Jubi and entered the Six Paths mode, there is no way to cause enough damage to them just by relying on ordinary release techniques. However, energy such as Kenjutsu and Senjutsu chakra can still cause some damage to them, which is why although he doesn't have much Senjutsu chakra in his body, he still extracted a part of chakra sage jutsu and integrated it into his attack. But seeing Kagaya fighting with him, Watergate's heart involuntarily became alert. After integrating a part of chakra into the Rasengan in his hand, barely maintaining the internal balance of the Rasengan, Watergate directly threw the two Rasengan in his hand towards Kagaya's chest. After throwing the two Rasengan in his hand, Minato immediately adjusted his body to avoid Otsutsuki Kagaya's attack. However, the two gray-brown sharp bone spurs still hit Watergate's left arm. At the moment of contact with Watergate's body, a gray aura directly drilled into Watergate's left arm, and this aura was still spreading rapidly. I can't keep this arm. Watergate is a qualified ninja, an excellent ninja, and the most suitable ninja to be a ninja. In the face of difficulties, Watergate directly exerted the courage and decisiveness in his blood to the extreme. Even if there is no abnormality in his left arm that can be seen with the naked eye, Watergate directly took out his kunai and cut off his entire left arm. Chapter 727. After decisively cutting off his left arm, Watergate immediately mobilized the chakra in his body to block all the blood vessels in his wound, so as to prevent his body from bleeding. Seeing Watergate cut off his left arm directly, whether it was Nangongja, who was rushing towards Watergate and Kaguya, hoping to help Watergate, or Naruto and Sasuke, who were hiding in the dark, ready to use the Fuinjutsu on Kaguya and Nangongja, their eyes were full of shock at this moment. How important are hands for a ninja? Almost the vast majority of ninjutsu require a ninja to use his own hands to make hand seals to guide the chakra to display powerful ninjutsu. Only a few Kekkei Genkai and one-handed ninjutsu can get rid of this shackle. Watergate himself is a ninjutsu-type ninja. Using ninjutsu to coordinate his attack is an effective attack method for Watergate. Holding the trident Flying Thunder God Kunai in his left hand and the Rasengan in his right hand, he can attack and defend. This has always been Watergate's usual attack pattern. But now Watergate directly cut off his left arm, whether it was Naruto, Sasuke, or Nangongja, they were naturally very shocked. And soon the reality made Naruto, Sasuke, and Nangongja see the benefits of Watergate's decisive behavior. The arm that was cut off by Watergate didn't fall to the ground, but it began to gradually collapse, as if it was weathered and then naturally decayed. One of his arms turned into ashes in an instant. Seeing such a situation, Watergate's heart was full of joy. Fortunately, he was able to cut off his left arm in time, regardless of the sacrifice. Otherwise, if the cold and gray aura that he felt was really transmitted to his body, then would his body directly become like his left arm that has now turned into ashes? After a little sigh in his heart, Nangongja and the other three had a clear understanding of the power of Kaguya's, killing the gray bone. Kaguya Otsutsuki, the legendary goddess of Uno, ancestor of chakra. When such an existence did not hide his strength at all and vented his strength to his heart's content, how many people could stop him? In the battle and competition between people, although there is a slight gap between the two sides, as long as a person's spirit is strong enough and a person's will is strong enough, then there is still a possibility of defeating the opponent. But the gap between the two is not just a difference of a few centimeters, but a difference of 1,000 miles. Can one really defeat such an enemy just by relying on spirit and will? Of course, although the situation is very critical, whether it's Watergate, Nangongja, or Naruto and Sasuke, who are hiding in the dark and accumulating power to seal Kaguya Otsutsuki, none of them are the kind of people with weak minds. Even if Kaguya Otsutsuki is indeed powerful and invincible, none of the four people has lost the belief of fighting. Moreover, the four of them didn't have the slightest chance. Naruto and Sasuke's bodies also contained Rikudo Sennin's 6 paths Yang Force and Rikudo Sennin's 6 paths Yang Force and Rikudo Sennin's 6 paths Yang Force. Even if the hope is slim, hope is still hope. Kaguya Otsutsuki attacked Watergate, Watergate hit Kaguya Otsutsuki, didn't avoid Kaguya's attack, Watergate cut off his arm. Although this series of things is a little complicated, in fact, it only took a few breaths. Although Watergate suffered a slight loss, he also blocked Kaguya Otsutsuki's footsteps. At this moment, Nangongja also came to Kaguya Otsutsuki's side with his super speed. Watergate held the trident in his hand, and Nangongja held the sword of catastrophe in his hand. The two people actually launched a siege on Kaguya Otsutsuki. Although it seemed that Otsutsuki Kaguya had a powerful force that could seriously injure or even kill people in an instant, it was a very unwise choice to engage in close combat with him. However, Nangongja and Namikaze Minato still rushed towards Otsutsuki Kaguya with short weapons in their hands. The reason why Watergate and Nangongja did this is actually very simple. Because when Watergate cut off his left arm just now, he cut it off along with his clothes. Otsutsuki Kaguya's mutual killing Grey Bones has an extremely powerful corrosive and offensive power, but it also has a weakness that is not a weakness, that is, the target of the mutual killing Grey Bones is actually only a human body or an object with life aura. Once the target doesn't have any breath of life in the body, the gray aura and corrosive power contained in the gray bone will not have any effect. At this moment, Nangongzhe and Watergate's Sword of Catastrophe and Flying Thunder God's Trident naturally don't have any breath of life, so this kind of dangerous but very effective attack is the most effective way to fight against Kagaya Otsutsuki's gray bone. As long as they are not hit by the gray bone spears condensed by the gray bone, then they will not be in any life-threatening danger. Watergate constantly used the body flicker technique that doesn't require any hand seals to change his posture, either dodging, blocking, or looking for gaps to attack. Watergate's ability to entangle the enemy to the extreme. Nangongzhe was holding the Sword of Catastrophe in his hand, constantly condensing his internal energy and sword chi in it. Once Watergate's strength is insufficient or he encounters an attack that he can't resist, Nangongzhe will directly take the Sword of Catastrophe and fight with Kagaya Otsutsuki to buy enough time for Watergate. Over and over again, the two of them really entangled Kagaya Otsutsuki. Every time Kagaya Otsutsuki wanted to break through the pincer attack of Watergate and Nangongzhe, Watergate immediately pushed away and didn't fight with Kagaya Otsutsuki. Instead, he replaced Kagaya with Nangongzhe, who has been accumulating power for a long time, to fight with Kagaya Otsutsuki. After Kagaya Otsutsuki's offensive posture is offset, Watergate will immediately rush forward like a slippery loach, and there is no way to catch him. Watergate and Nangongzhe relied on this method to buy time for Naruto and Sasuke to prepare the Rikudo Yin and Yang power seal. Chapter 728. Mother, we can't be entangled by them like this. Behind us, Naruto and Sasuke are now emitting a strong aura of 6 paths Yin and Yang. They must have learned from Hagoromo that you can only be sealed and can't be defeated. We must not be entangled by them. Black Zetsu, who was hiding in Otsutsuki Kagaya's sleeve, didn't directly participate in the battle, so he directly saw the situation of the entire battlefield and was anxious. Black Zetsu himself is naturally 100% loyal to Otsutsuki Kagaya, but after all, Black Zetsu is a creature with self-consciousness. For so many years, Black Zetsu has been trying his best to revive his mother, Otsutsuki Kagaya, and now, after thousands of years of hard work, he finally resurrected his mother. But at this moment, his mother was entangled by 2 people, and standing behind them, there were 2 people with the power of 6 paths Yin and Yang, ready to seal his mother in the same way. Does he have to go back to the time when he was accumulating power and planning plans? And the reason why he was able to smoothly mix in the ninja world was mainly because he was hiding in the dark. This time, in order to help his mother resurrect, Black Zetsu himself was standing directly under the sun. Once Otsutsuki Kagaya is really sealed, then even if Black Zetsu still has considerable strength, he still can't avoid the fate of being a rat crossing the street in the ninja world. Shut up. How could Otsutsuki Kagaya not know that if he was entangled by Nangongzhe and Watergate at this moment, he would be in a dangerous situation, but at this moment, Nangongzhe and Watergate were almost desperate to delay time here. Even if he wanted to rush out, it would take some time. Whenever he was ready to use a powerful attack to force the 2 people back, Nangongzhe and Watergate would desperately break up his chakra, and then cooperate with each other to fight him again. The more Black Zetsu explained the battle situation to him, the more anxious Otsutsuki Kagaya's heart was, and Black Zetsu just said something that should never be said, "What I do, I don't need you to tell me what to do. Since you have always regarded yourself as my 3rd son, then remember, Hagoromo and Hamura are both your brothers. No matter what they do, they are still my children. It's not your turn to talk nonsense here." For Otsutsuki Kagaya, Hagoromo and Hamura are 2 scars in his heart that can never be touched. Although Black Zetsu is indeed loyal enough, after all, Black Zetsu is just a strange existence born from the combination of yin-yang release and spiritual force. How can such a Black Zetsu be compared with Otsutsuki Hagoromo and Otsutsuki Hamura in the heart of Otsutsuki Kagaya, who was pregnant with him for 10 months and gave birth? Suddenly hearing Otsutsuki Kagaya's reprimand, Black Zetsu himself didn't react. After all, Otsutsuki Kagaya's attitude towards him was very intimate before, perhaps it was because of Otsutsuki Kagaya's deliberate show of intimacy that Black Zetsu himself was a little bit complacent and lost his usual exquisite mind. "I'm sorry, Mother. I said something wrong, but I still hope that Mother cannot be stingy with consumption now, and use the most powerful and effective attack to directly defeat these 4 people, otherwise, there will be endless trouble." In fact, when Otsutsuki Kagaya opened his mouth and scolded Black Zetsu, he also felt a little regret in his heart. After all, his 2 children obviously no longer exist in the shinobi world, so Black Zetsu, who is hiding in his sleeve at the moment, is the closest person to him. Although his scolding just now can be regarded as somewhat reasonable, but how can the relationship between people be sorted out with a few simple words? "Zetsu, I said something wrong just now, don't take it to heart." Otsutsuki Kagaya didn't know what kind of mentality drove him to admit his mistake to Black Zetsu. Otsutsuki Kagaya, who has always been the goddess of Uno, the ancestor of chakra, and other noble identities, is now admitting his mistake and apologizing to others. "Mother, you don't have to mind. I know very well that Mother is also very annoyed with the current situation, so no matter what kind of emotions you show, I can understand. Mother doesn't have to mind." Although Black Zetsu's words were very understanding, and his performance was also very generous. However, as a woman, especially a very powerful woman, Otsutsuki Kagaya naturally felt a little estranged from Black Zetsu's seemingly indifferent prophecy. Sigh. "After all, the closest person to me still can't understand each other?" Otsutsuki Kagaya sighed softly in his heart, but he still adjusted his mood. What he should consider now is not how to win over others, but to find a way to get out of the quagmire created by Minato and Nangonja, and then not be sealed by Naruto and Sasuke's powerful Fuinjutsu containing the power of 6 paths yin and yang that they prepared together at this moment. All things in the world turn to nothingness. Expand the truth-seeking ball. The truth-seeking ball itself has the power to release the opposite power of the existence in contact with it, and then disintegrate the other party. However, because the truth-seeking ball itself is relatively small, it is generally only used to offset some ninjutsu. But at this moment, Otsutsuki Kagaya opened his hands, and the black truth-seeking ball was constantly expanding, as if there was no limit to its expansion. In the end, Otsutsuki Kagaya still listened to Black Zetsu's advice and used such a powerful ninjutsu that will consume a lot of his chakra. In the process of the truth-seeking ball's expansion, Nangonja and Watergate, who have been wandering around Otsutsuki Kagaya and fighting, were directly forced to retreat. After all, the truth-seeking ball is different from the gray-brown bone spur formed by killing gray bone. The ability of the truth-seeking ball can be used on any substance. Nangonja and Watergate are naturally not afraid of sacrifice, but Nangonja and Watergate don't want their sacrifice to be meaningless, so Nangonja and Watergate stopped attacking Otsutsuki Kagaya almost at the same time and withdrew. Chapter 729. The dark truth-seeking ball was constantly injected with pure and vigorous Jubi chakra, and the truth-seeking ball itself also became larger and larger due to the accumulation of chakra in the body. It slowly grew from the size of a normal tennis ball. In just a few breaths, the truth-seeking ball directly expanded into a huge sphere with a diameter of nearly 3 meters. Kagaya's slender figure was so obvious in comparison to the expanding truth-seeking ball. Although Watergate and Nangonja themselves have a certain amount of experience and knowledge, Naruto and Sasuke, who have the power of 6 paths and the power of 6 paths in their bodies, can see it more clearly. Behind Naruto, there is also a truth-seeking ball with the same nature as the expanding truth-seeking ball that Kagaya used, but because of the same nature, he can better understand Kagaya's strength. The reason why Naruto can have the truth-seeking ball is mainly because of the small amount of Jubi chakra in his body that was taken by Uchiha Obito from Uchiha Madara's body, and the other part is the power of 6 paths activated in his body by 6 paths Sannin. The power of Jubi chakra and the power of 6 paths complements each other, which allows Naruto to enter such a mode that is similar to 6 paths mode, but is different from Uchiha Obito and Uchiha Madara who absorbed Jubi and became Jubi column force. At this moment, the person in front of Naruto and Sasuke can be said to be the source of all chakra, Kagaya Otsutsuki. The principle of yin and yang is also clear in Otsutsuki Kagaya's heart. When it comes to the purity of chakra, no one can surpass Otsutsuki Kagaya. Under such conditions, Otsutsuki Kagaya's truth-seeking ball was naturally far beyond the scope of Naruto's understanding and coping with in all aspects. Such a powerful truth-seeking ball, is it really a power that should exist in the world? No one can answer Naruto's words, because at this moment, everyone is not thinking about how to break such a truth-seeking ball, but how to survive under the truth-seeking ball's obliteration. You foolish people! I am the goddess of Uno, Kagaya Otsutsuki. You live in the world, men steal and women prostitute, filthy. For thousands of years, you still attack each other, without rest. This land is red because of you, the sky is full of blood. Tears. Millions of years ago, I once gave you all a chance and helped you quell the chaos caused by the war between you all. However, up until now, you still don't know how to cherish it. How stupid are you? Since you are so stupid, I will to chaos to eliminate your sins. Kagaya, in her hand, Kagaya. Her lips moved a little, and her voice spread directly throughout the shinobi world. Whether it was the ninjas on the battlefield who were lucky enough not to be illuminated by the blood moon and avoided the attack of the tree, or those who were hiding in their own fortresses and praying that they could successfully pass through this danger, they all heard Otsutsuki Kagaya's voice at this moment. Kagaya is different from Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Obito. Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Obito pursued conquest and control the entire shinobi world in their own hands. Even the so-called Eye of the Moon project, in the end, will keep the lives of others, but they will fall into genjutsu and listen to their orders. But what Kagaya clearly showed at this moment is not the so-called conquest, but complete annihilation. Everything in the shinobi world is regarded as a disdainful garbage, and now Kagaya sees himself as a person who will clean up the shinobi world. As for control? Thousands of years ago, Kagaya has already done it, and this kind of control is not attractive to Kagaya at all. Kagaya's purpose is to destroy the world? After hearing Kagaya's declaration, Naruto, Sasuke, Watergate, and Nangongja were naturally the most emotional people on the battlefield. After all the previous actions of Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Obito were just to pull everyone in the shinobi world into genjutsu space, and use genjutsu to bind everyone and bring eternal peace to the shinobi world. Although everyone in the 5 great shinobi villages was full of condemnation for their actions and plans, but in essence, their starting point is understandable, but their behavior is indeed a bit extreme. But now, the first sentence of Kagaya's mouth is to directly destroy the world. Conquest and destruction, although sometimes seem to be the same thing, but the mentality is different. What conquest requires is to take control of what you desire in your own hands. The means and attitude can be tough, but at least this thing can't be too damaged, otherwise, how can it be regarded as conquest? Destruction, on the other hand, is pure destruction. The destroyer destroyed everything in sight. It made no difference to the destroyer whether these things were broken into pieces or directly annihilated into dust. We must find a way to stop him. The shinobi world can't be destroyed like this. Whether it is Naruto, Sasuke, Watergate, or Nangongja, such a strong voice appeared in their hearts at this moment. Maybe the 4 of them are in different camps, and maybe the 4 of them have different goals, but this shinobi world is an important existence for them to realize each other's demands and wishes. Once the shinobi world no longer exists, then how can their personal demands and wishes be realized? At the same time, Sasuke, Watergate, and Nangongja all gathered around Naruto at this moment. At this moment, the expanding truth-seeking ball used by Kagaya is essentially the same as the truth-seeking ball that appeared behind Naruto. As long as they can get a certain degree of understanding from Naruto, maybe everyone can really solve the crisis at this moment. Naruto can naturally also perceive the trend and purpose of the other three people approaching him, but the more people look forward to it, the more the sadness in Naruto's heart became stronger. Doesn't Naruto want to find a way to solve the crisis as soon as possible? Naruto, who has the truth-seeking ball, thinks more than anyone else, and sees the reality more clearly than anyone else. The power he uses is far less than the truth-seeking ball controlled by Kagaya. As long as chakra exists, it will not be destroyed at all. And Kagaya is obviously inextricably linked to the Jubi, and has almost endless chakra. How can such an enemy be defeated? Naruto really can't think of the slightest way. Chapter 730. Naruto. Everyone gathered around Naruto, and after all, Sasuke, who was about the same age as Naruto and had a deep bond with Naruto, was the first to speak to Naruto. But just as Sasuke called out Naruto's name, Naruto shook his head and stopped Sasuke from continuing. There is no way to solve it at all. Naruto opened his eyes, and there was a strong sense of despair in them. For a long time, Naruto has been an extremely optimistic and cheerful person, and he usually encourages everyone. But now, even Naruto, who has a happy personality, has a bit of sadness and despair in his eyes, which is enough to prove how serious the situation has become. Truth-seeking ball is different from some other ninjutsu. Naruto stood in place, glanced at Otsutsuki Kagaya, who was floating in the sky and completely ignored Naruto's group of four, then looked at the truth-seeking ball floating behind him, and said to Sasuke, Watergate, and Nangongja, the truth-seeking jade itself isn't a real substance. It's a substance that exists between illusion and reality. Although in our eyes, truth-seeking ball is a black sphere, in fact, this is not the appearance of the real truth-seeking ball. The black, observed in our eyes is actually the truth-seeking ball's state after it neutralizes and swallows the light around it. With that said, Naruto opened his hand, and one of the several truth-seeking balls floating behind Naruto was controlled by Naruto and came to Naruto's hand. At this moment, the black sphere in Naruto's hand was constantly changing, like a trickle flowing on Naruto's fingertips and palms. The nature of truth-seeking ball itself is not constant. In the hands of the controller, truth-seeking ball can be solid, liquid, or even gas. For the caster, truth-seeking ball is a part of their body and will not cause any harm to themselves. But for other existences, truth-seeking ball is a fatal existence that can directly erase their existence. What Naruto said, in fact, Watergate and the others have already grasped the meaning of truth-seeking ball through the previous battle with Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Obito, but they were not as specific as what Naruto said, so they still listened patiently, hoping to find a way to fight against Kagaya's truth-seeking ball from Naruto's narration. Although truth-seeking ball itself has extremely strong destructive and defensive power, it also has its own weakness, which is the energy supply. Truth-seeking balls, if it wants ball's energy, it will have to release energy. That's as energy will have to be released. The more powerful the neutralization, the more consumed chas. But, how could such a weakness be considered a weakness for Otsutsuki Kagaya? As long as the supply of chas exists, truth-seeking ball will always exist, and we can't do anything about it. When the truth-seeking ball uses its special ability, there is a limit to the amount of energy it can supply. Once the amount of chakra is insufficient, the truth-seeking ball will naturally break through his defense and directly attack his body. In the previous battle with Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Obito, the reason why Senjutsu Chas and Sword Chi, which are more condensed than ordinary energy, can break through the defense was because the Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Obito's truth-seeking ball's ability to neutralize objects wasn't pushed to the extreme. The truth-seeking ball only consumed a part of its energy, and it directly broke through the defense and attacked Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Obito. But such a weakness is not a weakness at all for Kagaya, who is almost as powerful as the Jubi. Using the truth-seeking ball to offset the entire shinobi world is something that Kagaya can do. It's just to wear down a few attacks and wear down a few ninjas who are far inferior to him. For Kagaya, there is no pressure at all. The only weakness that can be targeted is directly made up for by Kagaya's own strength at this moment. What method should the four of them use to defeat Kagaya? Everyone's eyebrows were locked. In such a predicament, there was no effective solution for them, so they could only frown here, but they couldn't find a way to deal with Otsutsuki Kagaya. However, just when everyone was at a loss, Nangongja suddenly stood up from the crowd and said to Naruto, Sasuke, and Watergate, I have a way here that is not a way. Now that everyone is at a loss, suddenly Nangongja said that he has a way, everyone naturally has no reason not to listen. After the three of them nodded, Nangongja also began to talk about his so-called method to everyone. Indeed, from the perspective of the truth-seeking ball itself, there is no weakness. Even if there is a weakness, Kagaya Otsutsuki relied on his own strength to make up for this weakness. But why don't we pull our thinking out of the confrontation technique? Correct our thinking? Stop thinking about confrontation technique? Although Nangongja had only said a few words, the people who were present were all sharp-witted and quick to understand. Since it's not confrontation technique itself, then the only thing that can be used to fight is the existence of the caster. In the previous plan, in fact, everyone worked hard with the goal of sealing Otsutsuki Kagaya. But after Kagaya Otsutsuki vowed to destroy the world, everyone began to think about how to stop Kagaya Otsutsuki from destroying the world, instead of defeating and sealing him. Everyone fell into a misunderstanding. Indeed, no one has a way to fight against the almost perfect truth-seeking ball, but everyone has a way to fight against Kagaya, the 6 paths of yin and yang power in Naruto and Sasuke's body. All the problems finally return to the original origin again, to defeat Kagaya and bring hope to the shinobi world. It seems that you all understand what I mean. Instead of being entangled here on how to deal with the truth-seeking ball, it's better to concentrate on thinking about how to defeat and seal Otsutsuki Kagaya. Truth-seeking ball is just a ninjutsu, and Kagaya is the root of all the chaos. Looking at the three people around him with a look of understanding, Nangongja slowly said to the three of them. Chapter 731. The huge chakra in Kagaya's body continued to gather in the huge truth-seeking ball in her hand. Looking at the truth-seeking ball in her hand getting bigger and bigger, Kagaya's heart wasn't as calm and indifferent as when she made the declaration of the destruction of the world. In the final analysis, although Otsutsuki Kagaya's character is very extreme, and sometimes his behavior is very incomprehensible, but Otsutsuki Kagaya himself can also be regarded as a kind person. She loved her children dearly. She loved the world dearly. It is precisely because her love is too deep, so deep that it is difficult to extricate herself, that Kagaya's twisted personality made her do so many seemingly cruel things. But every time she makes a difficult decision, every time she makes a cruel choice, Kagaya's heart is filled with endless sorrow, suffering for her own actions. But even if her heart is very painful and tormented, Kagaya's heart always believes that everything she does is for the sake of this world. May you rest in peace. Kagaya's eyes gently swept across the ground under her feet. After a slight sinking of her heart, she closed her eyes and whispered softly as if praying for the beings that are about to be destroyed by her. As soon as Otsutsuki Kagaya's voice fell, suddenly the sharp sound of the air being torn apart appeared in his ears. His brows furrowed slightly, and his originally pure and holy face was now slightly distorted. Kagaya's personality is very twisted, and the thing that Kagaya can't tolerate the most is that someone dares to disobey her will and do things beyond her plan. In other words, I, the goddess of Uno, Kagaya Otsutsuki, didn't want this world to be ruined by you, so I forced myself to endure the sadness of destroying so many lives and granted you death. Why don't you accept my final mercy? Why do you have to come out and resist? What's there to resist with your current appearance? Just die properly. Kagaya gently pushed her hands, and as if the expanding truth-seeking ball was stuck in the sky, she directly shattered the small sword formed by the chakra that was shot towards her. Nangongja? In the ninja world, there is no one else who can use chakra and pose a threat to her except for Nangongja. Such a so-called internal force practitioner that Otsutsuki Kagaya had never heard of, relied on his own strength to make the ancestor of chakra, Kagaya, remember his name. Black Zetsu was hidden in Kagaya's sleeve. He had been telling all kinds of information to Kagaya, but he didn't know when he started to become silent. Black Zetsu has absolute loyalty to Kagaya from the depths of his soul, but loyalty doesn't mean that Black Zetsu can ignore his ego and be loyal to Kagaya, so Black Zetsu chose to be silent at this moment. Why did Hagoromo and Hamura attack Kagaya, who was his mother, and seal her away for such a long time? Kagaya's mother, Kagaya's mother, Kagaya's mother's. Hamura and Hagoromo didn't know how many times they used various means to persuade their mother not to regard all the lives in this world as strategic resources for the future war. But time and time again, in exchange for their mother's anger, Kagaya still directly absorbed many people into the chakra tree, turning them into her own energy source, and using them as a blueprint, she transformed a large number of war weapons, white Zetsu. No words can describe the disappointment and anger of Hamura and Hagoromo towards their mother. Hamura and Hagoromo looked at their mother, who was infinitely loving to them, but at this moment, she was so cold-blooded and ruthless to all living beings, and their hearts were filled with fear and anger towards Kagaya. For the two brothers, Kagaya Otsutsuki was no longer just their mother. Before their mother, Kagaya Otsutsuki was a terrible demon who would sacrifice the whole world for her own selfishness at any time and place. Kagaya's cold-bloodedness and ruthlessness not only forced her two children to oppose her, but also pushed Black Zetsu further and further away from her. Black Zetsu's silence didn't stop Nangong's group of 4 from attacking. Immediately after the sword chi, 9 huge Rasengan containing the tailed beast chakra appeared. Naruto decomposed the turbid Jubi chakra in his body, and directly pushed the Jubi chakra into the respective chakra of the 9 tailed beasts and the power of Gedo as a binder. In the 6 paths mode, Naruto directly condensed the golden chakra on his body into a giant golden hand, and condensed the power of Gedo, 6 paths, and the respective chakra of the 9 tailed beasts into the Odama Rasengan with the tailed beasts' respective chakra attributes. Uncle Nangong, help me restrict the actions of Kagaya Otsutsuki. Feeling that his 9-tailed beast Odama Rasengan containing great power were close to Kagaya Otsutsuki, Naruto suddenly shouted at Nangongja. After hearing Naruto's words, Nangongja, who was constantly accumulating sword chi in his body, burst out. Wisps of sword chi directly emerged from Nangongja's body, and these sword chi quickly condensed into the shape of the sword chi that was condensed before to break through the space barrier. 10,000 swords. Nangongja has never liked to name his moves, and almost all of them are named according to the characteristics of his moves. The simple, 10,000 swords, made everyone's heart full of shock, because at this moment, there were really countless sword chi swords condensing around Nangongja's body. A large number of sword chi swords under Nangongja's control were constantly flowing in the air like a long river. Compared to the violent destructive power of the sword chi dragon, the torrent of small swords at this moment is undoubtedly more pervasive, and has the effect of killing and trapping the enemy. Even for a moment, the light emitted by the small swords in the torrent of sword chi far exceeded the brilliance of the 9-tailed beast Odama Rasengan displayed by Naruto. Chapter 732. The torrent of sword chi went against the flow and rushed directly in the direction of Kagaya. The torrent of sword chi directly wrapped around Kagaya's body like a long river, and the dense sword chi directly wrapped Kagaya's body tightly in it. Quality and quantity have always been difficult to coexist. Nangongja condensed a large amount of sword chi and internal strength to form a small sword, and this huge amount of sword chi torrent naturally had a certain difference. The larger the number, the weaker the power contained in the individual. After Nangongja had confirmed that he had enveloped Kagaya in the cage formed by the torrent of sword chi, Nangongja also passed a look to Uchiha Sasuke, who was preparing on the side. Sasuke immediately understood and condensed his dojutsu, chakra, and the 6 paths of Yin in his body into his eyes. A flame was condensing in Sasuke's eyes. Rikudo Mangekyo Dojitsu, Amaterasu. Originally, the Amaterasu flame only used chakra and dojitsu as its own fuel. At this moment, there was a powerful force called the Six Paths of Yin in it. The higher the level of the burning energy, the greater the power of the Amaterasu flame itself. At this moment, the Amaterasu flame burned with eternal Mangekyo Dojitsu, 6 Tomo Rinnegan Dojitsu, chakra, and the Six Paths of Yin as fuel. At this moment, it also had a powerful force enough to hurt Kagaya. The torrent of sword chi displayed by Nangongja formed a cage that wrapped Kagaya in it, and the Rikudo of Mangekyo Dojitsu, Amaterasu launched by Uchiha Sasuke made up for the possible loopholes in the torrent of sword chi, tightly imprisoning Kagaya in it. The real killing move was the tailed beast Odama Rasengan created by Naruto using the 9-tailed beast's chakra, senjutsu, and the 6 paths of Yang's power. The 9-tailed beast Odama Rasengan containing the chakra nature of the 9-tailed beasts were directly suspended in the air under Naruto's control. They were directly connected like planets around the cage formed by the torrent of sword chi and the Amaterasu flame. The 9-tailed beast Odama Rasengan didn't directly attack Kagaya, who was imprisoned by the torrent of sword chi and the Amaterasu flame. Instead, they floated in the air, constantly revolving around Kagaya, releasing their aura wantonly. Shikaku, Nikomata, Isabu, Sun Wukong, King Mu, Rhino Inu, Halcyon, Ox Demon, and Kurama. I don't know if you can hear me, but if you can hear me, please work hard to resist. Now, not only are your lives and your consciousness in danger of extinction, but more importantly, even if your consciousness and your life are destroyed, your remaining energy will still be controlled by others, and all of this energy will be used to destroy countless lives. Naruto looked at Kagaya, who was surrounded by the torrent of sword chi, the Amaterasu flame, and the 9-tailed beast chakra, and loudly called out the names of the 9-tailed beasts. The aura of the tailed beast Odama Rasengan was also deliberately released by Naruto. Kagaya, who was wrapped in the torrent of sword chi, naturally also felt the aura of the 9-tailed beasts released by Naruto's Odama Rasengan. Naruto's words were naturally heard by Kagaya. Oh. Stupid. It's just a group of chakra, because of the ability of yin-yang release, it got the so-called body and consciousness. Now that it has returned to the body of the Jubi, the useless consciousness and body have been wiped out at this moment. Azura, do you think that by just relying on your so-called shouting, you can make such energy regain consciousness? Don't be so naive. Although Kagaya was wrapped in the torrent of sword chi, Kagaya's voice still came out of the cage formed by the torrent of sword chi and the Amaterasu flame. Kagaya's voice did not directly prevent Naruto from continuing to shout, and Naruto's voice still continued to drill into Kagaya's ears. Listening to Naruto's shouting, Kagaya, who was a little panicked because he was imprisoned, was completely eliminated at this moment. Kagaya thought that Naruto, Sasuke, Nangongja, and Watergate would do something threatening after imprisoning him, but just such a useless shout really made Kagaya feel useless. Listening to Uzumaki Naruto's hoarse shouting, Otsutsuki Kagaya's heart was filled with endless ridicule. At that time, the more he listened to Uzumaki Naruto's voice, Kagaya's face began to gradually change. At this moment, in Kagaya's body, it was obvious that 9 different kinds of chakra slowly condensed into a chakra ball, and the chakra ball was swimming in Kagaya's body. Although Kagaya's physical fitness is extremely strong, the various kinds of chakra condensed into a chakra ball, or the power of frost or flame burned Kagaya's meridians, and the damage and pain from the inside of his body was thousands of times stronger than the pain on the surface of his body. In the end, Kagaya still couldn't bear the powerful pain from his body, and a shrill cry like a cuckoo crying blood directly rushed out of the sword chi cage formed by the torrent of sword chi. Hearing Kagaya's almost shrill cry, whether it was Naruto, Sasuke, or Nangongja, their faces relaxed a bit. In the plan of the 4 people, the only uncontrollable factor is whether Naruto can awaken the will of the 9-tailed beasts with his own strength. Although Naruto has been saying that he can use the Bija chakra in his body to summon the will of the 9-tailed beasts in Kagaya's body. But Naruto can only vaguely sense it. Whether it is Sasuke, Watergate, Nangongja, or even Naruto himself, they are very uncertain about this kind of sensing. In fact, in the plan of the four people, there is also a second plan to implement if it is difficult to awaken the will of the tailed beasts. However, perhaps it was luck, or the bijou itself wasn't completely absorbed by Otsutsuki Kagaya. Naruto awakened the 9 bijous will again, which directly crippled Otsutsuki Kagaya's ability. Chapter 733. Otsutsuki Kagaya's chakra riot, which was beyond his expectation, directly appeared in his body. Otsutsuki Kagaya's own powerful strength itself comes from the almost endless chakra in his body and his physique far beyond that of ordinary people. Now the chakra in his body that belonged to the 9-tailed beasts suddenly rioted, almost simultaneously affecting Kagaya's own 2 major advantages and suppressing Kagaya's own strength, reducing the strength gap between Kagaya and Naruto, Sasuke, Watergate, and Nangongja, giving the 4 people a greater possibility of winning. After Nangongja and Sasuke looked at each other, the 2 directly removed their control of the sword chi cage and the Amaterasu flame. The sword chi cage and the Amaterasu flame lost their energy supply and gradually disappeared in the air. Kagaya, who was originally in the cage built by the sword chi cage and the Amaterasu flame, lost his shackles at this moment. Not only did he not directly jump out like a trapped dragon, but he directly fell from the sky as if he had lost his support. Kagaya himself had the ability to float in the air almost instinctively, but at this moment, Kagaya fell directly to the ground like a feather falling from the sky. His painful and mournful scream echoed in everyone's ears, but no one had the slightest pity in their hearts. Since they have already stood on the opposite side of each other, forgiveness is the most irresponsible way of doing things. What they should do now is to do their best to exert their most powerful strength and completely defeat Otsutsuki Kagaya without any room for resistance. Minato, who had not moved and disappeared, suddenly appeared above Otsutsuki Kagaya. In the first sword energy sword that Nangongja released towards Otsutsuki Kagaya before, it actually contained Minato's chakra. After Otsutsuki Kagaya directly stretched out his hand and shattered such a sword energy sword, it was actually equivalent to Minato's flying thunder god imprint on his body that doesn't have a long time. After coming to the side of Kagaya, who was constantly falling from the air, Watergate did not use any ninjutsu, but used chakra to greatly increase his physical strength. One of his hands turned into a hand blade, and a huge force was contained in it. Watergate directly chopped his own hand blade towards Kagaya's neck. Whether it's an ordinary ninja or Otsutsuki Kagaya, the ancestor of chakra, although their destructive power, resistance to ninjutsu, and other aspects are different, but ninjas are at a relative disadvantage when it comes to tempering their body because of their excessive pursuit of attack power. At this moment, because of the chakra in his body, Kagaya's control of his body has naturally been reduced to an extremely weak level. Now Kagaya watched Watergate attack him like this. Even if Kagaya has tried his best to adjust his body so that he can avoid Watergate's attack, but after all, he is not as flexible as Watergate. The hand blade containing a huge force directly chopped on Kagaya's neck. "You bastard! How dare you attack my mother?" Although Black Zetsu complained about Kagaya's previous reprimand, the trivial complaint can't offset Black Zetsu's almost instinctive loyalty to Kagaya. Seeing his mother being directly attacked by Watergate, Black Zetsu's consciousness seems to have fallen into a coma. This situation naturally made Black Zetsu unable to continue to sit down, and directly rushed out of Kagaya's sleeve. His black body has been completely distorted at this moment, like a black tentacle rushing directly towards Watergate's body. Since Nangongja and the others can cooperate so closely, they can directly stun Kagaya. Then this strange existence hidden in Kagaya's sleeve will naturally not be ignored by Nangongja and the others. Watergate looked at Black Zetsu rushing towards him and immediately took out a scroll from his arms. When discussing the content of the battle just now, everyone was quite helpless when mentioning Black Zetsu, but they can't directly destroy Black Zetsu, but they can also directly use a seal to seal Black Zetsu. Watergate extracted a part of Naruto's chakra with the characteristics of the Uzumaki clan and injected it into a scroll he carried with him. With his own will as the brush and Naruto's chakra as the ink, Watergate directly drew a temporary seal with the characteristics of the 4-symbol seal and the 8-trigram seal on the scroll. Watergate saw the trajectory of Black Zetsu's attack and directly pulled the scroll in his hand. The opened scroll in Watergate's hand was constantly dancing like a ribbon. The scroll was constantly dancing. Watergate also hoped to touch a part of Black Zetsu's body with the movement of the scroll. As long as he can touch Black Zetsu's body, the seal engraved in the scroll by Watergate will directly exert its power and seal Black Zetsu in it. Although Black Zetsu knows that Watergate wants to use the scroll in his hand to deal with him, but at this moment, in order to protect his mother, he can't retreat at all. Therefore, Black Zetsu can only directly attack Watergate despite knowing that there is danger in front of him. Most of Black Zetsu's efforts have been spent on planning various plans over the years, and naturally, he has less time to hone his strength. Moreover, Black Zetsu himself is different from ordinary humans. The chakra in his body and his physical strength are weaker than ordinary people, so compared to Watergate, Black Zetsu's strength is still much weaker. After several deliberate moves by Watergate, Black Zetsu's body was directly touched by the scroll in Watergate's hand. At the moment when the scroll touched Black Zetsu's body, the text in the scroll in Watergate's hand was constantly surging as if it was alive. The chakra that Naruto poured into the scroll was directly stimulated, and the chakra with the characteristics of Uzumaki directly condensed into a thick chakra chain under the stimulation of the sealing technique. This is the sealing technique that only Uzumaki clansmen can use, King Kong seal. Watergate is the husband of Uzumaki Shina Kushina. Although he himself doesn't have the special chakra of Uzumaki clan, he has also learned how to use the King Kong seal. At this moment, with the help of Naruto's chakra and sealing technique, he can display such a powerful ninjutsu that is close to Kekkai Genkai. Chapter 734. Layers of King Kong chains directly wrapped around Black Zetsu's body, directly wrapping Black Zetsu's twisted body tightly. Even if Black Zetsu constantly changed his posture, those King Kong chains were still tightly wrapped around Black Zetsu like maggots in tarsal bones, unable to move at all. No dash. No dash. No dash. Black Zetsu could clearly feel that his body was constantly being invaded by chakra in the King Kong chains, and his body was constantly being controlled. Even if Black Zetsu struggled with all his strength, he still couldn't break free from the shackles of the King Kong chains. Black Zetsu's body was constantly pulled into the seal scroll, and his body turned into black characters, which were directly sealed in the scroll. Black Zetsu's cry full of fear and struggle came to an abrupt end at the moment when Black Zetsu was completely sealed in the scroll. After seeing that Black Zetsu was completely absorbed into the seal scroll, Watergate also quickly closed the scroll directly. After all, this seal scroll was not a carefully made scroll with long-term effect. The seal text on it was very fragile. Once it was destroyed, its effect would be eliminated. Seeing Otsutsuki Kagaya's last barrier, Black Zetsu was directly sealed. Naruto and Sasuke, who had been preparing on the side, also began to act at this moment. Mobilizing the 6 paths of yin and yang power in their bodies to the extreme, Naruto and Sasuke represented the 2 extremes of yin and yang power in the world at this moment. They repelled each other but also attracted each other. An indescribably powerful fluctuation spread directly between Naruto and Sasuke. At this moment, Naruto and Sasuke directly rose from the ground as if they had escaped from gravity. Naruto and Sasuke directly hit their fists on the left and right sides of Otsutsuki Kagaya. The 6 paths of yin and yang power in their bodies invaded Otsutsuki Kagaya's body almost instantaneously. After the 6 paths of yang power released by Naruto entered Otsutsuki Kagaya's body, it immediately pulled the yin attribute chakra out of Otsutsuki Kagaya's body. The yin power released by Sasuke pulled all the yang attribute chakra out of Otsutsuki Kagaya's body. The power in Otsutsuki Kagaya's body was undoubtedly huge. The yin and yang power released by Naruto and Sasuke was actually equivalent to opening a dam in Otsutsuki Kagaya's body, which was almost leakless body, so that Otsutsuki Kagaya's dam, which stored a large amount of chakra, directly broke at this moment. With a little guidance of their yin and yang power, they directly pulled all the huge chakra out of Otsutsuki Kagaya's body. After a large number of chakra was pulled into the air, it began to evolve into a variety of strange scenes. But the most amazing thing was that a large number of yin and yang chakra automatically gathered together at this moment, forming a huge unknown Buddha statue. Red, gold and blue-purple formed such a huge Buddha statue. The position of Naruto and Sasuke just corresponded to the tightly closed hands of the Buddha statue, and Otsutsuki Kagaya just happened to be in the hands of Naruto and Sasuke. Rikudo, Chibaku Tensei. Although Naruto and Sasuke didn't discuss it in advance, they said the name of this move in unison. These chakra extracted from Otsutsuki Kagaya's body were directly controlled by the yin and yang power of 6 paths in Naruto and Sasuke's body, and attacked their original master, Otsutsuki Kagaya. The powerful squeezing force directly acted on Otsutsuki Kagaya's body, and a black sphere appeared uncontrollably inside Otsutsuki Kagaya's body at this moment. Unlike the black of truth-seeking ball that swallowed light, the black sphere that appeared in Otsutsuki Kagaya's body at this moment was closer to a pure black. The yin and yang power of 6 paths in Naruto and Sasuke's body turned into a thin film on this black sphere, so that this black sphere would not be swallowed by Otsutsuki Kagaya, and it could continue to play its role. The black sphere was naturally the core of Chibaku Tensei's gravity. Because of the yin and yang power of 6 paths, the gravity undoubtedly became stronger, and all the gravity was emitted from Otsutsuki Kagaya's body, so naturally, Otsutsuki Kagaya had no room to escape. Perceiving that the black sphere had already played its power, Naruto and Sasuke also quickly took Nangongja and Water Gate out of the attack range of Rikudo Tensei to prevent themselves from being affected. Huge pieces of stone, soil, trees, and many other debris that were absorbed by Nangongja's group were attracted by the powerful gravity of Otsutsuki Kagaya's body and constantly gathered on Otsutsuki Kagaya's body. These stones, soil, trees, and debris themselves were very ordinary substances, but at this moment, the huge Buddha statue in the air was constantly extracting its own power and injecting it into these existences, increasing their strength and making them difficult to destroy. Stones, soil, trees, and debris wrapped Otsutsuki Kagaya layer by layer. Although the number of layers of wrapping increased, the huge Buddha statue in the air also became fainter and fainter. When the Buddha statue's shadow had faded to a certain extent, the attraction of Rikudo Tensei to other existences seemed to be deliberately suppressed and became extremely weak. At this moment, the huge dual-colored Buddha statue seemed to have its own consciousness. It took a deep look at the huge sphere in front of it with pity and many indescribable emotions in its eyes. It opened its palms and held it under the sphere formed by the 6 paths, Chibaku Tensei. With just a gentle push, the sphere flew directly into the air, passing through the space barrier of the origin sphere. The huge sphere came to the real world, and on the way, it seemed to be constantly absorbing all kinds of substances, and its body size became bigger and bigger. After thousands of years of planning and hatred, at this moment, Otsutsuki Kagaya was sealed again as an ending. It was quite emotional to talk about it. Perhaps if Otsutsuki Kagaya wasn't so powerful and didn't swallow the chakra fruit, with Otsutsuki Kagaya's deep love for his child, he could have a simple, happy, and beautiful life. He didn't have to experience betrayal, and he didn't have to be directly submerged in the torrent of history. But there are no ifs, everything that has happened can't be changed, and the only thing that can be changed is the unknown future. And the ones who create the future are Naruto, Watergate, Sasuke, and Nangongja, who are standing on the battlefield at this moment. Chapter 735. Among the 4 of them, perhaps only Naruto didn't quite understand the current situation. He had been looking at his father, Watergate, and Nangongja and Sasuke with a slightly puzzled look. Although Naruto wasn't so proficient in politics, Naruto wasn't a fool either. At this moment, although the atmosphere between Watergate and Nangongja was obscure, Naruto could still fully recognize it. Watergate looked at Nangongja. Although his expression was serious, his face still maintained a gentle expression as he said to Nangongja, "Nangong-sama, thank you for standing up for the survival of the shinobi world and fighting for the entire shinobi world. In this war, whether it is our 5 great shinobi villages or your Blood Cloak Pavilion, we have suffered great casualties. After our 5 great shinobi villages have reorganized, we will invite you to join us for a post-war meeting to discuss a charter to make up for our losses." Watergate's words were sincere, and it can be regarded as giving up part of the 5 great shinobi villages' detached attitude towards the entire shinobi world. Originally, this meeting would only take place between the 5 great shinobi villages, but Watergate actually began to invite Nangongja to join. This was undoubtedly telling Nangongja that the 5 great shinobi villages have recognized that the Blood Cloak Pavilion is already a powerful force on par with them. As long as you are willing to take a step back now, then the Blood Cloak Pavilion will become the 6th force in the shinobi world, and together with the 5 great shinobi villages, they will control the entire shinobi world. Is such a condition tempting? Of course, it is very tempting. If all the conditions mentioned by Watergate can really be achieved, then Nangongja will definitely agree to Watergate's proposal. But can Watergate's words really become a reality? Redistributing the huge cake that has already been divided, and letting the 5 great ninja villages dig out a part of the cake that has already been swallowed and give it to others to eat. How can such a thing be discussed in a meeting like the so-called Minato Shinobi? And from the perspective of the 5 great shinobi villages, the Blood Cloak Pavilion's participation in the war is actually after the 5 great shinobi villages have suffered a lot of losses and withstood part of the Akatsuki's attack. To a certain extent, such participation is also taking advantage of the 5 great shinobi villages. The 5 great shinobi villages will not tolerate such a force trying to take advantage of their own interests. In the end, wealth is tempting. Interests make people's hearts are hard to settle. It is too difficult to make the 5 great shinobi villages give up. Unless Nangongja can show his own powerful strength that the 5 great shinobi villages can't resist, and let the 5 great shinobi villages understand that dividing the benefits is a suitable choice, so that they can swallow the benefits that are in their mouths. 4th Sama, the 4 shinobi, do you think shinobi, T? I can believe you because your character is well known. But I am not only myself, I am also the head of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. I believe that I am only putting myself at risk, but as the head of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, I believe that you are putting all the members of the Blood Cloak Pavilion on a scale. Your character and credibility can make 1 person, 2 people, or even 10 or 20 people willing to risk their lives to believe in you, but do you think that your credibility is more precious than the lives of hundreds of people? Nangongja's words were actually very harsh. Watergate, who was standing opposite to Nangongja, heard Nangongja's words and his heart sank. He was indeed talking to Nangongja based on Nangongja's understanding of his character, but now Nangongja didn't represent his own interests, but the interests of the entire Blood Cloak Pavilion. If it was Watergate himself, he also wouldn't put such important interests on 1 person's character. Is this battle between us really unavoidable? Watergate looked at Nangongja standing opposite him with an indescribable expression. Whether from a public or private point of view, Watergate didn't want the 5 great shinobi villages to have to fight with the Blood Cloak Pavilion again after the battle with Uchiha Madara, Uchiha Obito, and Otsutsuki Kagaya. The 5 great shinobi villages really couldn't afford such a loss. But as Nangongja just said, Watergate was also very clear that if the Blood Cloak Pavilion really wanted to be on par with the 5 great shinobi villages, they must show their muscles well and let the 5 great shinobi villages understand the power of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. Otherwise, even if the Blood Cloak Pavilion could really win a part of the benefits with his help, in the end, this piece of meat in their mouths may be directly pulled out of their mouths. It's not us, but the Blood Cloak Pavilion and this old world have to fight, otherwise, the Blood Cloak Pavilion will have no room to survive. What does war mean? The most eye-catching thing is the flow of blood and the loss of life. Although Nangongzhi has experienced large and small wars, and the lives in his hands are more than hundreds of thousands, but with the increase of age and the accumulation of experience, Nangongzhi more and more hoped that he could solve the problem as much as possible through some more gentle means. However, the world will not change because of one person's will, and the reality still forced Nangongzhi to take the lives of people over and over again. Now, Nangongzhi still has to fight. Because Nangongzhi is the head of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, Nangongzhi has to fight for the future of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. Sasuke. Let's go. After Sasuke heard Nangongzhi's words, the 6-tomo Rinnegan in his eyes quickly rotated, directly creating a passage connecting the origin sphere and the real world. Nangongzhi took out a blood-colored jade pendant from his bosom. He clenched his fist and shattered the jade pendant. A blood-colored light shot up into the sky from the jade pendant's fragments. When the Blood Cloth Pavilion disciples who were still able to move on the battlefield saw the light beam, they all took the injured Blood Cloth Pavilion disciples who could not move on their own and left in a certain direction as if they had planned this beforehand. Sasuke also left with Nangongzhi. Naruto stood beside Watergate and watched Nangongzhi and Sasuke leave together. Originally, Naruto wanted to rush forward and directly ask Sasuke and his uncle Nangong why they had to fight. However, he was stopped by Watergate. When the blood in his head subsided a little, Naruto also understood that there was no way to persuade his father or uncle. He could only watch them lead their men to fight. He was clearly a savior who had just saved the entire world, but now he was still so powerless. Chapter 736. Naruto could only helplessly watch everything happen in front of him. He thought that as long as he defeated Otsutsuki Kagaya, there would be no more wars in the ninja world. But now it seems that Naruto thought too much, because as long as a person's heart still has selfish desires, then the war will never end. Is it really impossible for people to understand each other, and can only achieve their goals by harming each other through war? Naruto couldn't find the answer, and could only be held by his father, Watergate Namikaze, to use the Flying Thunder God Jutsu to leave the defense of heaven that was about to collapse. After leaving the Heaven's Defense space, Nangongzhi and Sasuke immediately headed directly to the previously scheduled location without stopping. When Nangongzhi and Sasuke arrived at the designated location, the disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion had also gathered. Seeing that nearly one-third of the Blood Robe Pavilion disciples had been reduced, Nangongzhi's eyes became uncontrollably wet. Nangongzhi didn't hide the sadness in his heart at the moment, but directly showed all his sadness. The disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion looked at their leader, who had always been serious and even a little bit cold, at this moment, showing such emotions, and everyone's heart was also full of sadness. Looking at the disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion around him, Nangongzhi cupped his hands and saluted everyone, then said to the remaining disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion, "Everyone. I, Nangongzhi, have let you all down. If I had been stronger, I might have been able to end this war earlier and lessen our losses a little. Today, so many disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion have been reduced, it's really my fault. I'm really sorry, everyone." With that, Nangongzhi cupped his hands and bowed deeply to everyone. "You don't have to do this, leader. We all know that our sacrifice now is for the future, leader, you don't have to blame yourself so much. Our dead brothers will never blame the leader, we all know that the leader has done a lot for us, and has done a lot of things that he didn't want to do, we are sorry for the leader." Sasuke stood to the side, watching the various performances of Nangongzhi and the many disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion. His face was still cold as he watched from the side, as if he was coldly observing everyone. There was no doubt that Uchiha Sasuke was firmly on the side of Nangongzhi for various reasons. But it wasn't the Blood Robe Pavilion that convinced Sasuke, but only Nangongzhi. Sasuke didn't have any feelings for the Blood Robe Pavilion. Obviously, Nangongja was trying his best to win people's hearts before the war. Sasuke didn't have any rejection or resistance to this approach, he just watched Nangongja flexibly display various techniques. Although Sasuke didn't want to learn and use such techniques, Sasuke believed that he should understand such means, otherwise, if he encountered such a situation in the future, he might not have the means to deal with it. After a few words from Nangongja, the remaining disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion also became excited and full of fighting spirit. Seeing that the morale of the disciples was high, Nangongja finally pulled out the sword hanging on his waist and directly inserted it into the ground in front of him. The power of nature, internal strength, and sword energy poured into the sword. These energies constantly impacted the space, connecting the passage between the ninja world and the Lion Clan's different space. There were some geniuses of the Blood Robe Pavilion hidden in the Lion Clan's different space before the war, as well as some of their family members who had no fighting ability. There was also an elite team belonging to the Blood Robe Pavilion, acting as the last force to protect the families of the disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion. Although it was only a small team, it was actually composed of the top fighters of the Blood Robe Pavilion. When such a team was selected, none of the disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion fought for such a place that didn't directly participate in the war. Because at this moment, everyone broke out with an extremely strong sense of fairness. The 120 people in the team were recommended by many disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion, and they were powerful existences with great potential in the Blood Robe Pavilion. Now, Nangongja opened the door connecting the Lion Clan's different space to the ninja world in order to summon such a powerful backup force. He wanted to compete with the ninja coalition formed by the 5 major ninja villages, which had already been defeated by Uchiha Obito, Uchiha Madara, and Otsutsuki Kagaya. He wanted to win a place for internal strength cultivators in the ninja world. Nangongja's plan was basically clear to the high-level disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion, and some low-level disciples also knew a little about it. Nangongja wasn't worried that his plan would be intercepted by the 5 major ninja villages, because the Blood Robe Pavilion was an organization that was too independent of the ninja world. Ninjas were existences who cultivated chakra, while the disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion cultivated internal strength. The two types of energy can be said to be fundamentally different. In order to climb to a high position in the Blood Robe Pavilion, the most important condition was the level of internal strength. Such a request undoubtedly allowed the Blood Garment Pavilion to grasp all of its power tightly in its hands. Thousands of years of seclusion had not only filled the disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion with an enterprising spirit, but also an extremely strong sense of exclusion. It was almost impossible to win over the high-level disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion. After seeing Nangongja establish a space channel and summon them, the elite team of 120 people left the Lion Clan's different space and directly came to the ninja world. Supreme Sama. Everyone, please rise. After seeing Nangongja, all the members of the team directly knelt on the ground and saluted to Nangongja. After Nangongja returned the salute, the elite team of the Lion Clan's different space began to look around at the remaining disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion outside. Many of the members of the elite team looked at their surroundings with disappointment, sadness, and anger. Many of their family members and friends were left behind in the outside world. After all, it was impossible for everyone in a family to be strong enough to meet the requirements. When they saw that their families and friends were gone, everyone understood that they had sacrificed themselves. Everyone was ready to sacrifice themselves, but their families and friends left them like this, which was quite difficult for the disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion to accept. Chapter 737. While the Blood Garment Pavilion was preparing their troops and summoning all the forces they could muster, Shui men naturally wouldn't just stand there and do nothing. Forcibly suppressing the fatigue after the fierce battle with Otsutsuki Kagaya, Watergate traced the marks left by Orochimaru and Tsunade, and found the two who had not participated in the battle in the middle of the battle. They were more like bystanders. Orochimaru-sama. Tsunade-sama. Although he was already the supreme leader of Woodleaf Village, the two people standing in front of him were his sensei, Jiraiya's teammates. So whether it was from the position of the Sannin or for his own seniority, Watergate was very respectful to address them as Sama. Even if Orochimaru was still a traitor of Woodleaf Ninja Village. Yondaime-sama, you don't have to be so polite. I'm just a traitor of Woodleaf. The crimes of that year will not be erased in any case. A traitor for a day, a traitor for a lifetime. Now I'm just a traitor of Woodleaf. You don't have to be so polite to a traitor, do you? Orochimaru looked at Minato with a smile on his face, as if he was judging other people. He put a layer of sin on himself. Standing on the side, Tsunade looked at Orochimaru and Watergate, and suddenly felt that she didn't quite understand what was going on with them. As the granddaughter of Woodleaf first Hokage and second Hokage, although Tsunade was not fully exposed to politics, she had a certain understanding of some political tactics and means. Since Watergate directly addressed Orochimaru as Sama, just now, it naturally represents Watergate's goodwill to Orochimaru. As long as Orochimaru can go with the flow, Watergate can use his own means to whitewash Orochimaru, and even take advantage of such an opportunity to push Orochimaru to a very high position. From then on, Orochimaru will no longer be a traitor of Woodleaf in the ninja world, but the backbone of his own ninja village. After experiencing this period of time with Orochimaru, Tsunade could clearly sense that Orochimaru's previous madness and paranoia seemed to have weakened a lot, and his whole person became wise and far-sighted. This kind of wise and calm Orochimaru was actually the original Orochimaru in Tsunade's impression. Tsunade wasn't very clear about what kind of thoughts Orochimaru had in his heart, but thinking about it from her perspective, Tsunade felt that Orochimaru was actually eager to return to Woodleaf at this moment. But clearly now that there was a way down, why did Orochimaru himself want to tear down the steps that Watergate deliberately built for him? To himself? Seeing Orochimaru's actions, Tsunade was just about to stand up and explain Orochimaru's behavior to Watergate and fight for the opportunity for Orochimaru to return to Woodleaf Village. But a figure came out of the cave where Orochimaru and Tsunade were hiding and put his hand on Tsunade's shoulder. Tsunade's personality was well known. In the entire ninja world, there was only one person who could put his hand on Tsunade's shoulder and not let her directly explode. That person was Yondaime Hokage, Watergate's master, Jiraiya. Seeing Jiraiya put his hand on her shoulder, Tsunade also instinctively looked at Jiraiya's face. The battle just now made Jiraiya's body extremely tired, but Jiraiya's eyes were not cloudy. Instead, they were somewhat bright. Jiraiya shook his head at Tsunade. Obviously, he wanted to stop Tsunade from saying anything more. If there was anyone in the world who understood Orochimaru, then this person must be Jiraiya. Although he wasn't very clear about what Orochimaru was thinking at this moment, Orochimaru definitely wouldn't say this just to argue with Watergate. After Watergate became Hokage, Jiraiya already knew that Watergate could no longer be the original cheerful, sunny, and extremely gentle Watergate. After all, apart from the benefits that power brought, it also brought with it tremendous pressure and erosion. Although Jiraiya wasn't very clear about Orochimaru's plan at this moment, Jiraiya could still guess Watergate's plan. After the battle with Uchiha Obito, Uchiha Madara, and Otsutsuki Kagaya, the 5 major ninja villages suffered heavy losses, but relatively speaking, Woodleaf Village's strength loss was not so great. Now that Orochimaru was in a state of communication, Watergate would naturally try his best to pull Orochimaru into his camp. A Kage-level powerhouse can be said to be a mainstay for a ninja village. Once an existence like Orochimaru with enough deterrence returns to Woodleaf, Woodleaf will have more initiative in the future situation. Watergate can forgive Orochimaru's past sins, and his behavior of bringing Orochimaru back to the ninja village under pressure will also make Orochimaru completely labeled as Hokage. As long as Watergate's ambition in his heart reaches the point where it's difficult to suppress, then Watergate can directly conquer the other 4 ninja villages with the powerful strength of Woodleaf Village. After all, unlike the other ninja villages who almost came out of their nest, Woodleaf Village still left a considerable number of ninja in their own ninja village as a reserve force. In any case, Orochimaru-sama, you have made a lot of contributions to Woodleaf, but since ancient times, the flaws can't obscure the jade, and I should respect you enough. Since you insist on bearing the burden of your sins, I naturally won't say anything more. But what we need to do now is not to settle old accounts. The war is still not over. Watergate didn't want to entangle too much with Orochimaru. After all, his sensei and his wife were standing here at the moment, and with their relationship with Orochimaru, they will definitely do their best to bring Orochimaru back to Woodleaf Village. Watergate said these words here at the moment to send a signal to his sensei and his wife. Now that his sensei and his wife obviously understood what he wanted to express, Watergate naturally didn't need to entangle too much with such things, and directly said the real reason why he came here: you're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.